Eye contact held one beat too long. You're in a conversation, maybe at a bar, maybe at work, and someone looks at you while they're listening. Normal so far, but then they don't look away. Not in a creepy stairway, just present, a half second longer than the social script allows. Your nervous system notices before your conscious mind does. Something shifts. That tiny overhold of eye contact is not an accident. It's a signal that says, I see you, and I'm not checking out of this moment. Most people think attraction lives in big gestures, compliments, touches, grand declarations, but the real wiring happens in these millisecond gaps. Eye contact that lingers exactly long enough to feel deliberate, but not so long it becomes uncomfortable, is a form of presence. It tells your brain, this person is choosing me right now. There's no pretense in it, no scanning the room for a better option, no autopilot, and that intentionality is magnetic. Your brain reads it as confidence, as interest, as safety, all at once. The tricky part is that most people have no idea they're doing it, and most people who feel it can't quite name what just happened. You might find yourself thinking about that person later, replaying the conversation, trying to figure out why it felt different. It probably wasn't what they said. It was the quality of attention they held while they were with you. That one held beat of eye contact is also a test, a quiet way of checking if you're real, if you're willing to meet them there. And if you match it, even for a moment, you've just told them something your words haven't said yet. It's the smallest commitment, and somehow the largest. The signal spreads through your whole body in ways you won't feel consciously until hours later. Next time you catch yourself holding someone's gaze a fraction longer than necessary, pause. You might be showing them exactly what they needed to see. Pupil dilation feedback loop. You're sitting across from someone at a bar and you notice their eyes look alive, wider, darker, almost magnetic. What you're actually seeing is their pupils reacting to you. Pupils dilate when we're interested or aroused, which is a dead honest signal your conscious mind can't fake. But here's where it gets circular. When you catch that dilation, something shifts in you. You feel seen, you feel wanted, and that feeling makes your own pupils dilate in response, which the other person picks up on, which deepens their sense that you're into them. Neither of you is lying. You're both just watching each other become more attracted in real time. This loop runs silent and fast. Most people never consciously notice pupil size. They just feel the vibe get heavier, warmer, more charged. The pupils are doing the work while you're busy thinking of something clever to say. And because it's unconscious, it carries more weight than words. A compliment can feel forced. Wider pupils feel like truth. What makes this trigger so impossibly sticky is that it's bidirectional. Attraction isn't something one person does to another. It's a feedback system. The moment one person's nervous system signals interest, it activates interest in the other person, which signals back, which amplifies the first. You can watch it happen in slow motion if you pay attention. A slight widening, a micro pause, a shift in how someone's face settles when they look at you. The trap is thinking you can manipulate this. You can't dilate your pupils on command, and fake dilation gets caught somewhere in the limbic system. People feel the artificial before they see it. What you can do is actually pay attention. When someone's pupils widen, they've already decided you're interesting before you ever opened your mouth. That moment is an invitation. The real work isn't performing attraction, it's noticing you've already begun attracting them and whether you're present enough to meet what's actually happening in front of you. Breaking eye contact downward. Watch someone you're attracted to break eye contact by looking down instead of away to the side or up. It lands different. There's a vulnerability in it, a softness that sideways glances don't carry. When you look down, you're not scanning for escape or dismissing someone. You're doing something quieter, you're feeling something and you need a moment. Your nervous system is showing, and somehow that's magnetic. People mistake it for shyness, but it's actually the opposite of a power move. It's an admission. It's a pause that says the conversation matters enough that you need to collect yourself. The brain reads this as genuine, not performed. In a world where everyone's learned to hold their gaze steady, to appear confident and unaffected, looking down in the middle of connection feels rare. It reads as honesty. When someone does this while you're talking about something you care about, their eyes dropping to your chest or their lap instead of locking onto yours, something in you softens too. You interpret it as, they're not trying to dominate the moment, they're experiencing it with you. There's no arena energy. It feels like intimacy instead of a contest. The tricky part is timing. A downward break too early feels evasive, too late and it reads as indifference, but caught at exactly the right second, when the thing you just said landed, when the air between you shifted, that downward glance becomes proof that you reached them. It's the visual equivalent of a breath intake, the kind that says they're not performing through the feeling, but living inside it with you. They felt you, and the fact that their reflex was to look inward, to process, to be present with the sensation rather than push through it or deflect, that's what makes the whole thing stick so hard. Most people never clock why they're drawn in. They just know looking down at the right moment changes everything about how close you feel. Slow blink comfort signal. Watch someone you trust for a few seconds. Really watch. Notice when they close their eyes just a fraction longer than a normal blink, like they're luxuriating in a moment of peace. That slow blink is a neurological handshake. It's what cats do before they rub against you, what your nervous system does when the person across from you feels safe. When someone slow blinks at you, they're essentially saying, I'm not afraid of you, my defenses are down, and right now, you're not a threat. Your lizard brain picks this up instantly, and something in you softens. The reverse is equally magnetic. Is not going to be any injury. How wendy bevwati quality emperor and one. When you slow blink back, you're not just being polite, you're literally signaling vulnerability. You're lowering your guard in real time. Most people have no idea they're doing this or reading this. A rushed, snappy conversation creates rapid blinks, tight eye contact, a feeling of being examined. A warm conversation creates those slow, lingering closes. More like sighs. You've felt the difference without having a word for it. The trap is that slow blinks can't be faked for long. Genuine comfort pairs with pupil dilation, micro relaxations around the eyes, a softness in the entire face. Your nervous system knows when someone's performing calmness, so when you're in a room with someone and they slow blink at you and you feel that sudden rush of trust, that's not magic. That's biology recognizing biology. Try it next time you're talking to someone you actually like. Drop your eye contact for a beat longer than normal. Close your eyes like you're savoring a sip of something warm. Watch what happens. Their shoulders drop. Their voice changes. The whole energy shifts. You've just told them, without words, that they matter enough for you to let your guard down. That small gesture, repeated, becomes the foundation of attraction. Not because of what it says, but because of what it proves about your nervous system's willingness to trust theirs. Triangular gaze pattern. Watch someone you find attractive across a room and notice where your eyes actually go, not their whole face at once. That's too easy for your brain to dismiss. Instead, you land on their left eye, drift down to their mouth, then over to their right eye, forming an invisible triangle. You've just performed a micro ritual that signals intimacy and intent, and if they're watching, something in them registers it as different from casual interest. The triangle works because it mimics the gaze pattern we reserve for people we're considering kissing or trusting completely. Your eyes never stay still on a stranger's face the way they might at a job interview or across a conference table. They move with a kind of intimate curiosity, mapping features like you're learning someone rather than merely observing them. Research shows that when people mirror this triangular pattern back, especially the slow drift to the mouth, attraction chemistry shifts noticeably upward. It's not about flirtation exactly, it's about a specific type of attention that feels personal rather than generic. The real trick is that none of this happens on purpose. You don't decide to triangulate someone's face any more than they decide to feel seen by it. But the moment you notice the pattern in yourself, you catch it everywhere. Coffee shops, dates, conversations where suddenly the air gets thick and alive. The inverse tells you something too. If someone never breaks their gaze into a triangle with you, if they keep eye contact flat and steady instead, that's real information. Attraction often announces itself not through dramatic gestures, but through the exact geometry of where someone's attention chooses to land. Pay close attention the next time someone's eyes move across your face in a way that makes your skin wake up. That triangular path isn't random. It's your nervous system speaking a language older than words, one your body already understands perfectly well. Vocal pitch dropping mid-conversation. Pay attention next time someone you're drawn to leans in during a sentence and notice what happens to their voice. Often, without any rehearsal or thought, it drops. Gets lower, slower, almost intimate, not staged, just a shift. The same person who was chatting at normal volume suddenly sounds like they're telling you a secret, and your nervous system notices this before your conscious mind does. There's a reason. A dropping pitch signals relaxation, confidence, and focus. It says, I'm comfortable enough with you to lower my guard. Animals do this too. A dog's playbow is a pitch drop version of body language. When someone's voice descends into that lower register while talking to you specifically, your brain reads it as safety and intention. It's magnetic because it feels chosen. This person could be loud or distant or formal, but instead they're becoming smaller, quieter, more present with you. The trap is mistaking it for intimacy when it's actually just a neurological response to proximity and attention. Some people lower their pitch with everyone. Some do it to manipulate. Some do it because they genuinely like you and want to create a bubble of conversation that feels separate from the room. The real tells are consistency and context. Does their body relax too? Do their eyes stay with you? Or does the voice drop while their attention drifts somewhere else, toward their phone or someone walking past? The vocal drop alone is neutral. It's a door that opens possibility, not proof of anything, but if you're paying attention, it's one of the first signals that someone has shifted into a different mode with you. Next time you're in conversation with someone interesting, listen for that moment when their voice sinks. It happens fast, often in the same breath. That's the moment you've moved from background noise to foreground. Whether that's good or not, whether it means something real or just a practiced move, that's up to you to decide and keep watching for. Volume drop that demands a lean in. You're in a conversation with someone and they suddenly lower their voice mid-sentence, not because they're angry or sad, but because they're pulling you closer into intimacy. Your body does it automatically. You lean in, you quiet your own breath, you narrow your focus to just them. That drop in volume is a gravity well, and you're falling toward it whether you realize it or not. It works because it breaks the normal acoustic contract between two people. Loudness says, I'm comfortable, I'm safe, I can afford to broadcast. Softness says, I'm trusting you with something, I need you to pay attention, I'm making space just for you. When someone shifts to a whisper or a hush, your nervous system reads it as confidence mixed with vulnerability, the exact combination that rewires attraction. There's also the biological layer. Leaning in means you're closer, which triggers the oxytocin response and floods the olfactory sense. You're breathing the same air. You're literally in their space now, not by their invitation, but by your own impulse to hear them better. The person who knows this trick, who can modulate their volume like a conductor, doesn't have to ask for closeness. They've already engineered it into the conversation. Politicians know it. Therapists know it. People who seduce others know it cold. It's not manipulation exactly. It's communication architecture. But here's what happens next. Once you're leaning in, you're also more likely to believe what they're saying, to feel more connected, to assume good intent. Your critical thinking literally shifts into a softer gear when you're in someone's acoustic shadow. Your defensiveness drops at the same moment your attention sharpens. The trap sets itself. Notice the next time someone drops their voice around you, not just the words, but the invisible architecture it creates. That moment before you realize you've already moved closer, already softened, already started believing. That's the real work of the whisper. Speech rate convergence. You're on a coffee date, and somewhere around minute 12, you notice something strange. You and this person are talking at almost exactly the same pace. Not synchronized like robots, but your natural rhythm has drifted toward theirs, or theirs toward you, and now you're in this weird groove where the conversation feels almost frictionless. That's not accident. That's your nervous system mirroring theirs, and it's one of the quietest signals that attraction or trust is building. When two people unconsciously match each other's speech speed, it signals deep rapport, like you're on the same wavelength literally. Your brain is saying, this person is safe, this person is like me. A slow talker paired with a fast one will usually drift toward the middle. The energy-drunk extrovert will slow down slightly for the thoughtful introvert. It happens without planning, without awareness, and it happens faster when there's chemistry. The trap is that most people never notice it happening to them, which means they can't read it in real time. But start paying attention and you'll catch it everywhere. Job interviews where the candidate and hiring manager find a rhythm. First dates where two people suddenly sound like they've known each other for years. Arguments where people talk faster and tighter when they're defensive versus slower and deeper when they're opening up. The wild part is that the convergence itself creates more attraction because matching feels like understanding. Your brain reads alignment as agreement, safety, similarity. So the convergence isn't just a sign that connection is happening. It's actually helping create it, a feedback loop between bodies. The next time you're drawn to someone in conversation, notice your own speed. Are you slowing down, speeding up? That shift is your body already saying yes before your mind catches up, and it's telling you something real about what your nervous system recognizes in theirs. Pay attention to where your pace lands, and you'll hear the truth beneath the words. Breath audible before speaking. There's a moment before someone speaks, a split second where you hear them inhale, and something in that tiny sound shifts how you feel about them. It's not a gasp or a sigh. It's the sound of a pause, of someone gathering themselves before they say something that matters. You probably don't notice it on purpose, but your nervous system does. That audible breath is your brain's proof that they are present, that they care enough to compose themselves, that what comes next isn't just noise. In conversation, people who rush straight into words without that breath, no pause, no in-breath, feel like they're dumping ideas on you rather than sharing them with you. The breath is permission. It's the difference between someone telling you how they feel and someone confessing it. When attraction builds in real time, watch for this. The person leans forward slightly, takes that small inhale, and then speaks more carefully, more slowly. They're not being calculated. They're being deliberate. They're treating the moment like it deserves intention. It works the other way too. If you're drawn to someone and you start catching yourself taking that small breath before you speak to them, before you say something vulnerable or honest, you're signaling that they matter enough to slow down for. That breath is a micro-confession. It tells them you're not performing, you're present. The trap is assuming this only happens with strangers or new attraction. It actually deepens over time in relationships where presence survives. The long-partnered couple who still takes that breath before saying, "I love you" or "I'm sorry." That's not habit. That's proof the words still mean something. Notice your own breath next time you're speaking to someone who makes you feel alive. Are you pausing? Are you gathering yourself before you speak? That tiny inhale is your body saying yes before your mind catches up. The people who matter most often trigger this involuntary slowdown without you realizing it's happening at all. Micro-hesitation before a compliment. Watch someone's face the moment before they tell you that you did something well. There's a half-breath pause, a tiny catch of air, and your nervous system reads it as the sound of honesty hunting for words. That gap feels nothing like the smooth tumble of practiced flattery. It lands completely differently, and you sense the difference in your body long before your mind can name it. The hesitation signals restraint, genuine thought, someone actually considering what they want to say about you instead of running through an autopilot script. When praise flows frictionless without a single stall, you question it. Was that automatic? Are they like this with everyone? Did they even think before speaking? But when there's that micro stall, that tiny moment where someone seems to catch themselves or weigh their words, you feel genuinely seen. They weren't performing. They were thinking. One version of "you're really good at listening" delivered with that pause makes you glow. The exact same sentence, rattled off smooth as oil, slides off like water because something underneath signals the machinery is running, not the person. The hesitation is what separates a string of words from an actual moment of connection. It's why people who are practiced at giving compliments, salespeople, smooth therapists, certain charmers, can accidentally kill the whole effect by being too rehearsed. You catch the shift immediately, even if you never name it aloud. Your radar detects something slick, replacing something real. If you want your own praise to actually land and stick with someone, don't rush the delivery. Let there be a genuine moment between the thought and the words. Not so long it becomes awkward or forced. Just enough space to show you weren't reading from a script, that you meant it specifically for them. That tiny gap is where trust actually gets built. Deliberate conversational pause. Watch what happens when someone finishes a thought and then just waits. Not awkwardly, intentionally. They let 3 or 4 seconds of silence sit between their words and your response, and something in your nervous system shifts. That pause does something most people never decode. It signals that what they just said mattered enough to them that they didn't need to rush past it. No filler, no nervous laugh to gloss over the moment. Just trust that their words landed. In a world where everyone is scrambling to fill air, a deliberate pause reads as confidence and depth. You feel it the way you'd feel someone making eye contact without looking away first. Like they're not performing for you, they're present with you. That's attractive. Your brain reads silence from a secure person as power, silence from an anxious person as awkwardness. Same pause, completely different vibe. Most people believe attraction is built on being charming or saying exactly the right thing, but the real arrest happens in the space you're willing to hold. When you ask a question and then genuinely wait for the answer, instead of filling the void with your own guesses, you're doing something increasingly rare. You're listening like the other person matters more than your need to be heard. That registers deep. It makes people lean in closer, curious what you're sensing that they haven't said yet. The moment this gets interesting is when someone realizes you're not going to rescue them from their own silence. They have to actually think. actually be real, and when they do, they link that realness to you, like you carved out a pocket of air where pretense wasn't necessary. That becomes the scaffold genuine connection lives in. Start noticing these pauses everywhere. Start creating them in your own speech. Let 3 seconds feel like an eternity worth sitting in, and watch who moves closer, who stays, who comes back wanting more of that quiet space you made. Unhurried response latency. You text someone and they reply in 3 seconds. Instant, no pause. Something in your gut tightens, and not in a good way, because speed reads as desperation, or worse, like they weren't doing anything important anyway. Now imagine the same person takes 7 minutes to reply, long enough that you've moved on, checked email, started something else. When their message lands, there's a small thrill. They were busy. They had other things going, but they still came back to you. That gap is doing invisible work in the background. Humans are wired to interpret timing as value. When someone makes you wait, it signals they have competing demands. A full life, choices, people pulling at them. Their slowness becomes a kind of proof that reaching back across that delay to you meant something. It's the opposite of the puppy dog response. Urgency signals weakness. Deliberate pause signals strength. The trap is that this works only when it reads as natural, not calculated. A text sitting unread for 2 hours, then a thoughtful reply. That lands different than someone deliberately waiting to seem busy. You can feel the difference, even if you can't name it. The authentic pause comes wrapped in a real message, something that needed thought. The performance pause arrives hollow, and you sense it. This is why slow communication kills false intimacy fast. People who are genuinely absorbed, deep in work, in conversation, building something, naturally take longer to respond, and people feel that realness. They also feel when someone is checking their phone every 90 seconds but choosing not to reply yet. That's read as game playing, and it corrodes attraction faster than eagerness ever could. The deeper move isn't to play hard to get, it's to actually have a life worth being busy in. Build something dense enough that your attention becomes genuinely scarce. The latency will follow on its own, and when it does, it will mean something real. Comfortable silence, tolerance. You're sitting across from someone you're drawn to, and neither of you speaks for maybe 30 seconds. Most people fill that space immediately. A joke, a question, nervous laughter, something to prove they're still interesting. But this person just lets it exist. They don't fidget, don't pull out their phone, don't scramble to sound clever. They're just there with you in that quiet moment, and it lands different. That tolerance for silence, without anxiety, is magnetic because it signals something your brain registers instantly. Comfort with themselves and comfort with you. Silence usually means something is wrong, an argument, rejection, boredom. But when someone can sit with you in wordless ease, they're communicating that you don't need to perform, that there's no agenda running underneath the surface, that they're not evaluating you or waiting for their turn to impress. People who rush to fill silence are often managing their own discomfort. People who let it breathe are managing the space with confidence. This matters in attraction because vulnerability shows up in those quiet moments. You can't hide in silence the way you hide in words. A person who can be silently present with you, not awkwardly, not coldly, but genuinely comfortable, is revealing that they don't need constant validation or entertainment from you. That removes pressure entirely. You're not responsible for keeping them entertained or interested. You can just exist together without the weight of performance. That's why anchored people draw others in like gravity. They're not anxious, not seeking, not hungry for reassurance. They're simply there, solid and unhurried. Next time you're with someone and a silence falls, notice whether they break it anxiously or let it settle. That tiny choice tells you everything about whether they're running on anxiety or anchored in something deeper. The ones who can breathe in the quiet are the ones people actually want to stay near because being near them costs nothing. Trailing sentence completion. What happens when someone stops mid-sentence and leaves the thought dangling there like an unfinished melody? Most people dismiss it as nervousness or poor communication, but neurologically, something sharp is firing up. When a sentence breaks open without closure, your brain transforms into a completion machine. You're not just listening anymore, you're actively filling the blank space, leaning forward, becoming a co-author of their story. That collaboration, that tiny act of joint creation, knits you to them in a way complete sentences never can. It's called the Zeigarnik effect, and it works because incompleteness creates cognitive tension that your mind craves resolving. Picture the last time someone said, "I don't even know how to explain this, but when I saw you, I felt," and then stopped cold. You weren't just waiting passively, you were already imagining the ending, already writing their emotion for them. Now reverse it. When someone finishes everything, ties off every thread, explains the whole arc in one breathless paragraph, you can settle back. Task complete, nothing left to do. But trailing language, whether it's a real pause, a deliberate fade out, or just a soft, dissolving into silence, demands effort from the listener. And here's what matters. Effort equals investment. Your brain interprets effort as a signal that something is valuable. If you had to complete it yourself, it must mean something. You become the author of half the narrative, which means you own it entirely differently than if someone handed you the fully wrapped gift. The power isn't in what they spoke, it's in what you supplied. That's why people who wield the trailing pause feel magnetic, more interesting, more alive, more worth remembering. They've made you do the deep work of understanding them, and your own effort has turned them into someone you can't forget. The unfinished sentence doesn't just grab attention. It hands you a pen and asks you to write the ending alongside them, and you will defend that co-authored story with ferocity. Interruption of expected rhythm. You're listening to someone talk, and they're on autopilot. Same cadence, same predictable pauses, same tone. Your brain checks out, then they stop mid-sentence. Longer pause than usual, or they speed up suddenly, voice breaking slightly on a word they didn't expect to feel. Your attention snaps back like a rubber band. Something real just happened. Someone broke their own pattern, which means they're not performing anymore. They're actually present, unguarded, maybe a little surprised by their own emotion. When the rhythm breaks, your nervous system perks up because broken patterns signal authenticity or vulnerability or a shift in what someone's feeling. This is why the person who laughs at their own joke lands different than the one who delivers it perfectly. Why the colleague who usually seems composed but stumbles over a word suddenly feels human and approachable. Why silence in a conversation can feel more intimate than 1,000 smooth compliments. People naturally find this magnetic because predictability feels safe but boring, and unpredictability within reason feels alive and worth paying attention to. A text message from someone who normally never typos, suddenly full of them. Suddenly you're wondering what's on their mind. What has them distracted enough to miss things they usually catch? A laugh that cracks differently than usual. A hand that trembles holding a cup when they're usually so steady. These aren't flaws or signs of weakness. They're proof of realness, and realness is what makes someone stick in your brain long after they leave the room. The trick isn't to force these moments or perform vulnerability. That backfires instantly, and people feel it. It's to notice when you're in autopilot with someone and let yourself break rhythm naturally. Say the awkward thing. Pause longer than feels comfortable. Let your actual uncertainty show. The people worth attracting are waiting for someone to be real, not perfect. Mirrored posture without awareness. Walk into a cafe and watch any couple mid-conversation. Odds are their shoulders lean the same way, their chins tilt at matching angles, their hands rest in almost identical positions. Neither of them chose this. It just happened, and because it happened without strategy, without performance, something in that synchrony triggers a deep signal. We are aligned. We are safe together. You do not think, oh, they are mirroring each other. You just sense an ease, a rightness, a belonging. Your nervous system reads their body like a book written in a language older than words. When someone mirrors your posture, even slightly, you feel known, not in a conscious way. It hits below the chatter. Your brain registers. This person is like me. They get my rhythm. I can relax around them. It is why therapists, teachers, and natural leaders do this without thinking. They match the energy in the room, and suddenly people feel held. But here is where it gets interesting. The moment someone notices you are doing it deliberately, the spell breaks. It becomes manipulation. The magic only lives in the unconscious mirroring, the accidental symphony. So if you want to build genuine connection, do not study your reflection in someone else's body. Instead, become so present with them that your posture follows naturally, like water finding its level. Sit with them. Listen with your whole self. Let your shoulders drop when they drop theirs. Let your breathing slow to match their breathing. You will not be faking anything. You will be genuinely there. And that is when they feel it. The quiet signal that you are not performing for them. You are actually with them. That is when attraction, trust, and safety begin to build. The people who do this best are not thinking about mirroring at all. They have simply learned to disappear into the conversation, to become a mirror by accident rather than by design. Mirrored drink timing. Watch someone on a good first date and you'll notice something almost spooky. When one person takes a sip, the other reaches for their glass a beat or two later. Not immediately, that would feel robotic, but close enough that it reads as natural rhythm. Your nervous system picks this up faster than your conscious mind can name it. And what you feel is synchrony. Synchrony feels like safety. It feels like this person is with you, not just sitting across from you. Here's what's actually happening underneath. Mirrored drink timing signals that someone is tracking you, not in a creepy way, but in the way that says they're paying attention to your pace, your comfort level, how you move through the moment. When someone mirrors your physical rhythm, the speed at which you hydrate, the moments you pause to think, your brain reads it as a vote of confidence. They're not rushing ahead. They're not hanging back waiting for you to catch up. They're moving in time with you. This works because it's almost impossible to fake consciously. You can't sit there thinking, okay, I'll wait 3 seconds and then sip. The moment you start narrating it, it breaks. Real mirroring happens in the background, the same way your breathing syncs with someone else's when you're in deep conversation. It's why people who genuinely like each other end up with their bodies angled the same way, why they laugh at slightly the same cadence. What makes it magnetic is that it's the opposite of control. You're not trying to lead or impress. You're choosing, moment by moment, to move at someone else's tempo. That choice, that willingness to step into their rhythm instead of demanding they step into yours, registers as attraction because it's the foundation of real intimacy. Next time you're out with someone you're curious about, notice when the drinks move together. That's not accident. That's interest showing up in real time. Synchronized breathing rhythm. You've probably never thought about your lungs as a social instrument, but right now, someone across from you is already syncing theirs to yours, and neither of you knows it's happening. It's automatic. When two people sit close enough in a conversation or leaning in over dinner, their breathing patterns begin to match without intention, purely through presence. Neuroscientists call this respiratory synchrony, and it's become a quiet marker of genuine connection. What makes it a real trigger for attraction is that it works backwards too. When someone is trying to like you, their nervous system often unconsciously settles into your rhythm first. Your body knows something before your mind catches up. Here's what happens on the inside when this sync takes hold. Synchronized breathing activates the vagus nerve, the long cable that runs between your brain and your body's entire alarm system. When two people breathe together, even slightly out of phase but overlapping, both nervous systems downshift toward genuine calm. You feel safer, less defensive, more permeable to what the other person is actually saying, instead of scanning for threat. It's why couples who have been together for decades often breathe in unison without realizing it, and why first dates sometimes collapse the moment someone tenses up and the rhythm breaks. The trap is thinking you can fake this or manufacture it on demand. You can't, but you can allow it to happen. Slow your own breathing when you're nervous and watch what unfolds. The other person often settles too, matching your steadiness without knowing why. It's not manipulation, it's an invitation. Your body is literally saying, I'm calm enough to be here with you. And theirs answers back in kind. That invisible duet between two chests, two heartbeats, two nervous systems finding their way into the same quiet room. It's one of the first things attraction has already decided long before anyone speaks the words that matter. Feet pointed toward the target. Catch someone in a crowded room and you'll notice something almost nobody teaches you to look for: the direction their feet aim while their face points somewhere else. A woman glances at her phone, but her toes pivot toward the guy across the bar. A man nods along to a story his friend is telling, while his heel silently swivels toward the door where someone just entered. Your body betrays you in ways words never could. Your feet are like a compass that votes without permission, and that compass points toward what your nervous system actually wants. Attraction doesn't announce itself with big gestures. It whispers through stance and weight distribution and the invisible angle your lower body takes even when you're trying to seem indifferent. You've felt this before without naming it. That specific rightness when someone's entire frame seems organized toward you, when even their stillness has a direction. The mouth can lie. The feet arrive at the truth first. This is why it matters. Attraction lives in the body's honesty, not in what someone claims they feel. A person can face you dead on while talking and still have their feet angled away, which means their words might be kind, but their nervous system is already leaving. Flip it around. Feet angled toward you even when they're distracted or laughing at someone else's joke, and you're already wired into their actual attention. The body doesn't negotiate. Your own feet betray you just as reliably. In conversations that drain you, notice if your toes drift toward the exit. Around someone who magnetizes you, you might find yourself standing at an oblique angle that keeps them centered in your peripheral vision. The feet are a constant leak of real preference, a vocabulary your nervous system speaks before your conscious mind has even decided whether to admit it. This shift happens without thought or strategy. It's pure animal honesty. Pay attention to where people's weight settles. That's where their attraction actually lives. Torso orientation openness. Walk into a room where someone is facing a corner or turned away from the door and feel how closed off that lands. even if they're smiling at you. Now shift to watch someone whose chest is oriented toward the room, toward you, and register the difference in your own body. Your torso is a compass, and where it points broadcasts what you're actually feeling beneath the script you're reading. When someone's chest opens toward you, not just their face performing, but their actual shoulders and sternum. Their nervous system is confessing, I'm not braced against you right now. There's no wall, no armor. Neuroscientist Paul Ekman spent decades documenting that the torso doesn't lie the way the face can. A smile can fake welcome, but a chest angled away is the body's actual vote. You've felt this in conversations where someone leans back, ribcage sealed, and you sense the conversation is already leaving, even though words are still happening. Flip the script. When attraction is genuine, bodies pivot without permission. A person will unconsciously rotate their torso to face you more directly, even in a crowded room. Their shoulder angle shifts. Their hips reorganize. It's a micro-commitment. Their skeleton is literally saying, you matter enough for me to rearrange myself around you. The sneaky part is that people can perform attention with their face all day. Head turning, eye contact, the whole rehearsed kit. But sustained full torso orientation towards someone, that's expensive to fake because it requires continuous conscious effort. And most humans aren't self-aware enough to maintain that theater for long. So if you're trying to read whether someone is genuinely interested, not just being polite or performing, check where their sternum points. In one-on-one moments, in group settings, even in photographs, a closed torso that stays closed is often the first quiet no, the body's soft rejection before anyone's mouth catches up to say it out loud. Head tilt exposing the neck. Watch someone listen to a story they actually care about and you'll see it. That small tilt of the head, chin dropping slightly, the side of the neck suddenly visible and soft. It's not calculated. It happens when someone lowers their guard, when they're genuinely curious or interested, when they feel safe enough to expose a vulnerable part of their body. Your brain registers this micro movement faster than your conscious mind can catch it, and something in you relaxes in response. That tilt says I'm open, I'm not braced, I'm listening to you, not plotting against you. The reason this matters is buried in evolutionary wiring. A fully exposed neck is a sign of trust. You cannot defend it, cannot run as fast, cannot fight with your head tilted back. Only creatures who feel zero threat present themselves this way. When someone does this around you, their body is broadcasting safety, vulnerability, genuine engagement, and attraction is not separate from trust. It lives inside it. You are drawn to people who unconsciously signal they feel at ease with you because their ease becomes contagious. The catch is that most people who do this have no idea their head is tilted. It's not a manipulation tactic. It's a leak, a genuine tell that the guard has dropped. If you're on the receiving end of it, you feel seen, felt, chosen. If you're the one tilting, you're signaling all of this without words. The problem starts when someone notices this trigger and tries to use it intentionally. A calculated head tilt, performed to seduce, reads cold. It's the difference between a real smile and a faked one. The body always knows. The authenticity is what moves people. Pay attention to when your head naturally tilts toward someone and notice who tilts toward you when they speak. Those small angles are where real interest lives, and the people who create that angle without thinking about it are the ones worth watching closely. Barrier removal across the table. You're sitting across from someone at coffee, and without thinking about it, they move their cup to the side, not far, just enough that there's a clear sightline between you. Watch how that tiny shift changes the whole frequency of the conversation. Suddenly, you're leaning in a bit more. Your shoulders face them straighter, the invisible wall dissolved. That's barrier removal, and it hits the nervous system like a signal. This person is not defended against me. This person made themselves available. It doesn't matter if they did it consciously or not. The signal lands the same way. In dating, business, even friendship, the person who clears the path between you is the person your body votes for before your mind even weighs in. Put your phone screen down on the table instead of propped between you. Uncross your arms when someone you care about is talking. Pull your chair just slightly closer instead of staying at the edge of your seat. Lean your whole torso toward them instead of just your head. These are not tricks. They are the physical language of trust. The reverse is equally loud. When someone keeps a barrier up, phone between you, arms crossed, shoulders turned away, you feel it immediately, even if you can't name it. You interpret it as hesitation, rejection, distance, and you're right to notice, because they are holding something back. The weird part is that removing barriers doesn't make you seem weak or too eager when done naturally. It does the opposite. It signals that you don't need walls, that you're not afraid, that you're solid enough to be open. The person across from you catches that, registers it in their gut before their conscious mind gets involved, and suddenly, they want to remove barriers too. That's how attraction comes compounds. One small opening invites another, and the gap between you shrinks from furniture into conversation. Sitting lower to invite approach. Watch someone you're drawn to sit down at a bar or cafe and notice whether they're leaning back in the chair or perched on the edge, their body a little lower than the person standing next to them. That small drop in height does something magnetic. It makes you feel less threatened, more welcome, like they're not looking down at you or maintaining some tall, untouchable distance. Suddenly, the gap feels closable. Your nervous system reads it as permission. When you sit lower, whether that's actually lowering yourself or just the angle of how you hold your torso, you're sending a signal that you're not blocking access, that you're available to be approached. It's the opposite of someone rigid and elevated, armored in their own importance. Think about the last time someone made you feel comfortable enough to walk up and start talking. Chances are they weren't looming. They were settled, grounded, occupying space in a way that didn't feel defensive. People move toward what feels safe and away from what feels imposing, and height is one of the oldest threat detection systems we have. When you compress your silhouette slightly, sink into a chair, lower your chin a touch, let your shoulders drop, you're essentially saying, I'm not a predator, I'm not fortified, you won't get hurt coming closer. It's primal. The tricky part is doing it without looking meek or collapsed. It's not about making yourself small out of shame. It's about settling your weight, breathing into your seat, letting gravity work rather than fighting it. Both men and women respond to this, though the effect runs through different wiring. For women especially, it often reads as approachability without vulnerability. For men, it softens the dominant signal that can otherwise feel confrontational. The magic isn't in the posture alone. It's in what your body is actually saying to their nervous system, a wordless invitation that works faster than any line ever could. Next time you're somewhere you want to be noticed, don't reach up, sink in, and watch how the room shifts toward you. Occupying space without apology. Walk into any room and you'll spot the difference in seconds. The ones who curve inward, shoulders folded, voice small, always calculating whether they should move. Then there's the person who sits, leans back, speaks at their own volume, takes the space their body fills naturally. Watch who draws people closer. It's almost always the second one. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't apologize for existing in a room, and it has zero to do with aggression or rudeness. It's the opposite, actually. It's the absence of anxiety. You can feel the gap between someone taking up space to dominate versus someone taking it because they never questioned their right to be there in the first place. The first reads as fragile performance. The second reads as settled. When you're genuinely comfortable with your own presence, you don't fidget with your sleeves or lean away mid-conversation. You don't over-explain why you're standing near the snacks or compress your voice to match the room's energy. People read all that small body language as a question mark. Are you supposed to be here? Should I trust you? But someone who occupies their space without checking for permission first? That's a statement, not arrogance, just presence. Here's the weird part. It's contagious. When you stop apologizing for breathing, other people relax. They don't have to manage your comfort anymore. They can just exist next to you. And that relaxation, that ability to make a space feel easier just by not being anxious about your own footprint, that's pure magnetic pull. So next time you're talking with someone, notice where you're holding yourself. Are you making yourself smaller? Can you stay here fully without softening your edges or pulling back? Try it for one conversation and watch what shifts. Slow movement as status. Watch someone who knows they're worth watching. They don't rush to adjust their coffee cup. They don't scramble to be heard. They move like time is something they own rather than something chasing them. Now watch someone nervous in the same room. Fidgeting, quick gestures, that little jitter that screams, I need to prove I belong here. Your brain registers the difference instantly, even if you never put it into words. Slowness signals that someone isn't anxious about being dismissed. It says, I'm settled enough in my own space that I can take my time. There's a reason CEOs and old money types move with deliberate pacing, not glacially, but with an absence of hurry. It's the opposite of the energy of someone trying to fit in. When you're attracted to someone, you often don't realize you're drawn partly to how unrushed their movements feel. A slow blink, a hand that takes 2 seconds instead of one to reach for a glass. The way they turn their head like they're not worried about missing the moment. It reads as confidence, which reads as safety, which reads as magnetic. The trick is, this doesn't work if it's performed. We smell false slowness immediately because it carries tension underneath. Real slowness comes from genuinely not needing to prove anything. You can test this on yourself. Next time you're in a space where you feel like you need to compensate or impress, notice how fast your movements become. Notice how that speed probably makes you less compelling, not more. Then imagine what it feels like to move, like you already know you're interesting. The pace shifts, the energy changes, and suddenly, you're the person others slow down to watch. Your body knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. That taking your time, is the oldest signal of belonging. It's not arrogance, it's arrival. Stillness under social pressure. Watch what happens in a crowded room when someone doesn't scramble for air. The group is loud, overlapping, everyone reaching for attention, performing, and then there's one person who listens without fidgeting, who holds eye contact without blinking away first, who sits comfortable in their own skin while the rest of you are broadcasting anxiety through motion and noise. You notice them not because they're louder, but because they're so visibly not panicking. That calm is magnetic because it feels rare, almost impossible in a space designed to trigger insecurity. Most of us are wound tight in social settings, checking our phone, laughing a beat too hard, leaning forward to fill silences we're terrified of. We're all running a low-level anxiety loop, and when someone opts out of it entirely, you feel the difference like cool water on skin. Stillness signals something your brain reads as either confidence or mastery, or both, and attraction follows without you knowing why. There's no desperation in someone who can sit through an awkward pause without needing to fix it. There's no neediness in a person who doesn't rush to prove themselves when the pressure is on. You don't have to be charismatic. You don't have to have perfect things to say. You just have to be the one who doesn't fall apart when conversation dies, or everyone talks over each other and you say nothing anyway. When a group is all scrambling and signaling their inadequacy, your stillness becomes the eye of the storm. They lean in toward you because being near someone who isn't drowning feels like permission to stop fighting. It's not arrogance. It's a silent message. You already have enough. The quieter you stay while everyone else is performing, the more real power you hold in that room. That's what makes them want closer. Frame control through non-reaction. Watch someone try to get a reaction out of you. A joke that lands flat. A provocation, a test. Most people react on cue. They laugh, defend, explain, lean in. The moment they do, they've handed over the frame. You've just signaled that you care what they think more than you care about what you think. That's not attractive. But the person who doesn't flinch, who lets the awkward joke hang in the air without saving it, or hears criticism and nods slowly without defending, they stay in control, not through coldness or cruelty, but through an almost supernatural calm. You feel it in your nervous system. They are not performing for you. That changes everything. The mechanism runs deeper than you'd think. When someone reacts to you, they are asking permission. They're waiting to see if you will validate them, punish them, or engage. Non-reaction signals something far rarer, that you don't need any of those things from them. You're fine either way. That stance is magnetic precisely because it's uncommon and because it's true. Most people are desperately hungry for acknowledgement, and a person who doesn't need it becomes the only thing worth acknowledging. It's not about being aloof or playing games. It's about having an internal reference point so solid that external noise doesn't scramble your signal. When someone tries to bait you and you simply don't take it, when they say something mean and you smile like you heard a private joke, when they test your boundaries and you hold them without explaining why, you become the most interesting person in the room. The irony is sharp. This non-reaction doesn't push people away. It pulls them closer. They start chasing your approval because they realize they can't demand it. Frame control is just the quietest power there is. The choice to stay yourself, regardless of the temperature in the room, and that stillness is what actually moves people. Proximity and repeated bumping. You walk into the coffee shop on Tuesday, same barista. By Friday, she knows your order. 2 weeks in, you catch yourself timing your visits around her shift. Nothing happened. No flirting. No long conversations. But your brain has already started building a bond. This is the proximity effect at work, and it is so quiet you will never feel it happening. Humans are wired to feel safer, warmer, and eventually more attracted to people we see repeatedly. It is not about grand gestures or chemistry lightning bolts. It is about mere exposure. Your brain treats familiarity like a trust signal. The person you bump into 3 times a week in the elevator becomes less of a stranger and more of an ally, simply because your nervous system has stopped treating them as a threat. Repetition Repetition feels like relationship. Now here is where it gets sticky. Proximity works on almost everyone, regardless of intention. You can dislike someone intellectually and still warm to them if you see them enough. Co-workers, classmates, gym regulars, the neighbor who jogs past your window every morning. They all get a head start in your attraction hierarchy just by showing up. And the closer the physical proximity, the stronger the effect. Sitting across from someone in a study group hits different than waving at them from across the room. The reason this matters is that you might mistake familiarity for genuine compatibility. You spend time with someone not because they light you up, but because they are there, and your brain, lazy and efficient, reads there as meant to be. The real trap is that this works both ways. People can fall for you not because of who you are, but because you became part of their regular landscape. If you want someone to notice you, show up. Consistency builds attraction faster than perfection ever will. Boring, maybe, but true. Whispering that forces closeness. Someone leans in at a crowded table, voice dropping so low you have to tilt your head to catch every word, and suddenly the whole room goes quiet. Your nervous system doesn't care that they're just describing their morning. It registers intimacy. Whispering is a proximity hack, pure neurology. It collapses distance before your conscious mind even registers it happened. When someone whispers, you cannot hear them from arm's length away. Your brain interprets this forced closeness as trust, conspiracy, something shared only between the two of you. The world narrows. You become hyper-aware of their presence, their breath, the exact angle of their mouth. Your pupils dilate. Your heart rate shifts. Bonding chemicals spike because your body thinks you're in an intimate moment, whether you're discussing the weather or their deepest secret. The trap is that whispering feels like a gift. It feels like you're being let into something private, and maybe you are. But the mechanism works regardless of the content. A whisper about what sandwich they had for lunch carries the same intimacy signal as a confession. Your brain literally cannot distinguish between "they're telling me something important" and "they're choosing to be close to me." Both trigger the same ancient wiring that evolved long before language became precise. People who understand this don't need to say anything revolutionary. They just lean in, drop their voice, and suddenly they're unforgettable. You'll replay that moment a dozen times, that feeling of being singled out in a crowd. The funny part? Half the time you won't remember what they actually said. You'll just remember feeling seen. That's not accident. That's leverage built into your own biology. Next time someone whispers to you, notice the pause before you answer. That's your nervous system catching up, and by then, the story is already written. Hand hovering near contact. You're sitting across from someone at dinner and their hand drifts near yours on the table, close enough that you feel the warmth, far enough that it could still be accidental. Your nervous system notices before your conscious mind does. That tiny gap, that uncertain space, is doing more work than an actual touch ever could. It's a question. It's a risk. It's them saying, "I want to, but I'm asking permission," without using words. And your body responds to that vulnerability more than it would to confidence. This is the physics of desire meeting the psychology of restraint, and it matters because it signals intention without demand. A hand that hovers communicates something different than a hand that grabs or a hand that stays safely across the table. It says they're aware of the line and choosing to dance on it. Most people won't consciously register what's happening, but every cell in your skin will. You'll feel seen. You'll feel chosen. You'll feel like the move matters because it costs them something. Hesitation, the risk of rejection, the exposure of wanting. The real pull isn't in the contact, it's in the negotiation. It's in the space where attraction becomes mutual acknowledgement. A hovering hand is also a pause, a moment where they're giving you the chance to pull away, which somehow makes pulling closer feel like your decision too. That shifts everything. You're not being done to, you're doing it together. Your nervous system reads this as trust, as respect, as desire that's thoughtful enough to check first. And here's what's wild. This trigger works because it's the opposite of what most people default to. Most connections skip right over this delicate negotiation, but those who linger in that hovering space, who let uncertainty sit for one more breath, tend to create the kind of attraction that actually sticks around. The ones people remember, the ones that meant something because they mattered enough to get right. Accidental brush with deniability. There's a moment that happens in crowded rooms, on busy sidewalks, in the blur between intention and accident. Someone's hand finds your shoulder, steadies you, then pulls away like it was never meant to linger. The touch itself is barely there, but the afterimage stays. Your nervous system registers something that wasn't quite deliberate enough to call flirtation, and that ambiguity ambiguity is exactly what makes it stick. When attraction wears plausible deniability like a costume, it becomes magnetizing. Think about the text that arrives just late enough to seem accidental, a half joke about how you'd look in their favorite color, sent at midnight, followed by quick deletion emoji, or the person who leans closer during a conversation, their leg grazing yours under the table, then shifting away before you can be sure it happened. The brain loves this. It's attracted to mystery, partly because mystery requires you to solve it, to turn it over in your mind, like a puzzle you didn't know you were working on. This works because it keeps you out of the dangerous territory of rejection. If they brush your arm and then immediately step back, they can always claim it was nothing. You can't call them out without looking paranoid, but you also can't stop replaying it, wondering if there was more there. The plausible deniability creates a gap, and humans are wired to fill gaps. We complete the picture. We imagine the intention behind the accident. The trap is that you start investing in the mystery more than the person. Your attraction grows not from what they're actually doing, but from what you're constructing in that space between action and accident. It feels like magnetic pull, but it's often just your own mind doing the pulling. If you find yourself replaying small moments like their coded messages, ask yourself, is this person actually signaling, or am I turning breadcrumbs into a map? Object handoff, finger contact. Watch what happens when two people exchange a coffee cup, a phone, a pen. Most of the time, fingers don't touch at all. The object bridges the gap, stays neutral, safe, but sometimes skin grazes skin for maybe half a second. Nobody plans it. No conversation happens about it, yet something just shifted. Your pupils dilate a little. Your breath changes. You remember that touch for hours afterward, turning it over in your mind like a found object. The peculiar power here is that it lives in total plausible deniability. Neither person has to acknowledge it happened. It was just the way the cup was passed. Just bad timing. Just a clumsy moment. And yet your nervous system knows. It felt the warmth. It registered the skin. It filed away the information that this person was close enough to touch, and the rules allowed it, even for a breath. Because it was unplanned, it bypasses all your usual defenses, the ones you use when someone leans in intentionally or holds your gaze too long. Those moves are flagged. This one slips right past your guard entirely. This is not really about the touch itself. It is about what the touch means in a world where you are supposed to be maintaining distance, professionalism, boundaries. When a boundary dissolves by accident during a mundane transaction, your brain reads it as permission. It reads it as a tiny crack in the wall, a secret that both of you share without ever speaking. This is why people will engineer repeated handoffs, a book passed back and forth, a shared snack, a tool borrowed and returned. Each exchange is a small audition for intimacy, and the quietest ones, the ones that feel almost accidental, are the most potent. They feel like something that happened to you both, rather than something one of you orchestrated. That surrender is what makes it stick in memory, turning a transaction into a moment neither of you will quite forget. Touch on neutral zones first. You're at a coffee shop and someone brushes your arm, reaching past you to grab sugar. A half second of contact, nothing intimate, nothing planned. And suddenly, your nervous system wakes up. That small, casual touch on a neutral zone, shoulder, forearm, back of hand, functions like a neurological permission slip that lowers your guard without you realizing it's happening, precisely because it doesn't feel loaded or sexual. It's just there. Touch in neutral zones triggers oxytocin and trust responses, but it arrives wearing a disguise of pure casualness. A hand on the small of the back while walking through a door, a brief tap on the elbow during conversation, a shoulder lean that lasts just long enough to register but not long enough to feel forced. Your body doesn't flag it as flirtation. It flags it as familiarity, as someone comfortable enough to be close without asking permission first. Here's where timing and context become everything. These touches work best when they're woven into natural moments, handing you something, steering you through a crowd, emphasizing a joke, because calculated or lingering contact breaks the spell instantly and you feel invaded instead. But done right, brief and contextual and utterly unafraid of closeness, they create an invisible thread of connection that makes people want to stay near you longer. Most people think attraction ignites through eye contact or carefully chosen words, but your skin is listening listening too, registering every micro moment of proximity and temperature and touch. The person who understands this doesn't paw or hover or create awkward silences around closeness. They simply exist near you in a way that makes presence feel normal and safe and inevitable. By the time someone realizes they're drawn to you, neutral touch has already rewired their comfort with your physical space. They've been let in so gradually they never notice the door opening, and now staying close to you feels like the most natural thing in the world. Escalation via the touch ladder. You're at a bar and someone you're interested in laughs at your joke and touches your arm for half a second. Your whole nervous system notices. Later, they guide you through a doorway with a hand on your lower back. Then, their knee brushes yours under the table. None of these are accidents, and none of them feel like a grab. They feel like permission slowly being stacked on top of permission. This is the touch ladder, and it works because your brain processes each rung as a separate question you keep saying yes to without realizing you're voting. The genius of the touch ladder is that it sidesteps the big, scary moment. Instead of jumping to, "I'm going to hold your hand," you're building a chain of micro yeses that each feel natural, casual, almost inevitable. A shoulder touch feels different from a handhold only because the ladder got you there incrementally. By the time something bigger happens, your body has already normalized the contact and your guard has dropped in proportion. What makes this trigger so potent in attraction is that it lives below the level of self-consciousness. You're not thinking, "Oh, they're following a strategy." You're feeling a rising sense of comfort and permission. The person doing it knows that consent stacks. Resistance lives in the big moments. Comfort lives in the small ones you don't fully notice happening. And because each touch is brief, plausible, and easily deniable, "I was just steadying you," there's no moment where you feel trapped or pressured into a response. The catch: this works both ways. You can use this yourself, but more importantly, recognizing it when someone else is doing it, that slow, patient progression of contact, helps you stay honest about whether you're moving at your own speed or someone else's. The touch ladder only feels magical if you're not watching your foot hit each rung. Withdrawing touch to create want. There's a moment in every interaction where someone's hand leaves yours a beat too soon, and suddenly you're aware of the absence in a way you weren't aware of the presence. That's not accident, it's a pull. When touch arrives unexpectedly and then stops, your nervous system registers it as incomplete. And incompleteness is magnetic because your brain is a prediction machine that hates being left mid-sentence. You lean in without knowing why. A light hand on your shoulder during conversation, then removed. A brush of fingers that lasts 3 seconds instead of 10. A hug that pulls back before you're quite ready. Each one creates a small hunger because human contact is so rare in modern life that even the promise of it lights up your reward system like a slot machine about to pay out. The withdrawal isn't coldness, it's it's restraint, and restraint feels intentional. It feels like there's more available if you're interesting enough, if you move closer, if you keep them engaged. This is why absence can matter more than presence in attraction. Presence is a fact, but absence is a question. It makes you wonder what would happen if the touch continued, if the closeness deepened, if they stopped pulling back. You become the one reaching. You become invested in closing the gap they created. This doesn't manipulate someone into liking you, but it does make them notice you in a texture-rich way, as someone with boundaries, with intention, with something held back. And what's held back always feels valuable. The antidote isn't to never withdraw, but to notice when you do it on purpose versus when you do it out of anxiety or distance. One creates pull, the other creates confusion. The difference is presence masquerading as play versus presence shrinking from fear. Pay attention to your own touch map. Are you withdrawing because you're secure or because you're scared? Watch yourself for a week and see which one you're actually doing. Mere exposure familiarity drift. There's someone you see every Tuesday at the coffee shop. First time, they're just a face. Second time, your brain flags them as familiar. By week 8, you're not sure if you're drawn to them or just comfortable with them. And honestly, that line gets blurry fast. That's mere exposure at work. Repetition rewires attraction without you noticing. Your brain treats familiarity like a vote. The more it sees something, the safer it feels. And safety triggers a warm pull toward the person. It's not love yet. It's chemistry between your nervous system and a pattern. The trap is that you'll attribute this warmth to them, their laugh, their energy, something special. when really you're just becoming addicted to the loop of seeing them. It's why coworkers start seeming magnetic around month 4, why the barista feels like a friend when they're just part of your routine, why you can feel a genuine spark with someone you've never actually spoken to. Familiarity doesn't require conversation. It doesn't require attraction in the traditional sense. It just requires showing up in the same space enough times for your primitive brain to register. I know this shape. It's safe. Repeat exposure, cowork, mating potential. The sneaky part is how it fools you into thinking the person must be special. They stood out somehow, but they didn't. Your brain just got tired of being cautious. And that's actually dangerous in dating because you can build real emotional investment in someone based purely on the neurochemistry of routine. You see them, your dopamine ticks up slightly, and you mistake that for connection. The move, if you're aware of it, check if you're actually curious about them or just comfortable around them. Ask yourself something difficult. Would you chase this person if they weren't part of your regular orbit? If the answer is no, you're not attracted to them. You're attracted to the idea of them, which is a different animal entirely. Misattribution of arousal. Your heart is pounding. Your palms are damp. You feel alive in a way that makes your skin tingle, and the person standing in front of you feels like the reason why. Except they're not. You just ran up 5 flights of stairs chasing a deadline, and now someone walks in looking effortlessly calm. That racing heartbeat, that flush in your chest. Your nervous system thinks it's attraction. Your body can't tell the difference between the adrenaline from a stressful sprint and the electricity of genuine interest, so it folds both into one hot, jumbled signal. This is why people often feel magnetic chemistry with someone right after a fight, or why you might feel drawn to someone you met at a concert where the bass was shaking your ribs. The arousal was already running. They just happened to show up in the middle of it. You misattribute what your body is doing to who is in the room. The mechanism is simple, but almost impossible to notice in the moment because the feeling is so immediate and convincing. Your amygdala doesn't send you a memo saying, actually, that's just epinephrine from your workout. It just sends the sensation, and you write the story. This matters because it means attraction can feel sudden and inexplicable when really your nervous system was already primed. The other person didn't trigger it. They just got credit for what was already happening. The stickiest part, you can't feel your way out of this one. You can't trust your instincts to tell you the difference between real chemistry and borrowed energy. So the next time you feel an electric pull towards someone, try a quiet experiment. Notice what else is happening in your body. Are you caffeinated? Did you just finish something stressful? Were you laughing hard moments before? None of this means the connection is fake. It just means your body was already writing in bold, and they walked into a story your nervous system was already telling. Fear-based adrenaline sharing. Watch what happens when 2 strangers get stuck in an elevator and it lurches to a stop. In that first moment of genuine fright, they lock eyes, their pupils dilate, they breathe the same rhythm. 3 seconds of real danger and they're suddenly closer than they would be after 3 hours of small talk. This is not coincidence. It's your nervous system recognizing another human in the same threat state, and that synchrony creates an almost instant bond. Your body is screaming, this person gets what I'm experiencing right now, and that's a form of intimacy most people mistake for something deeper. The adrenaline surge does the heavy lifting. It sharpens your senses, narrows your focus to that one other person, and floods your brain with chemicals that make everything feel heightened and significant. A scary movie, a near accident, a turbulent flight, a dark walk through an unfamiliar neighborhood, anywhere real or imagined danger lives, you'll find people leaning into each other, seeking that shared nervous system activation. What makes this trigger so sneaky is that it feels personal, like chemistry, when really it's just biology hijacking your wiring. Your brain hasn't evolved to distinguish between we survived something together and we're meant to be together. The adrenaline doesn't care about your actual compatibility. It only cares that you're both in fight or flight mode at the same instant. That's why people form intense connections during crises or high-stakes activities and then feel confused when the danger passes and the connection evaporates like morning fog. The spell breaks because the chemical was doing all the talking. If you're aware of this, you can notice it happening. That little rush of closeness during a stressful moment, and pause before confusing adrenaline synchrony with genuine attraction. The nervous systems might be dancing together in the dark, mistaking rhythm for relationship, and the real question is whether anything survives when the music stops and the lights come back on. Novelty mistaken for chemistry. You meet someone, and suddenly your nervous system lights up, your pupils dilate, your palms get warm, you can't stop thinking about them. But here's the thing, most people never pause to ask, Are you attracted to them? Or are you attracted to the fact that they're new? Your brain doesn't always know the difference, and it's catastrophically easy to mistake one for the other. Novelty is a drug. A person you've never met before triggers dopamine the same way a novel experience does. A new city, a new hobby, a new risk. They're unpredictable. You don't know what they'll say next. That uncertainty hijacks your attention like nothing else can. And for a few weeks or months, that uncertainty feels like depth. It feels like chemistry. You think you're drawn to who they are when you're actually just drunk on who they aren't yet. Then time passes. The novelty wears off. You start to know their patterns, their go-to jokes, the way they always order the same drink. That dopamine spike flattens, and suddenly you're sitting across from someone and thinking, wait, who is this person? Not because they changed, but because your brain's novelty receptors have normalized them. The trap is that by then, you've often already made big moves. You've introduced them to friends, rearranged your schedule, maybe said things you can't unsay. What saves you is a small reset. When you feel that early magnetic pull, consciously separate the person from the newness. Ask yourself what you actually know about their values, how they handle stress, whether they're kind when no one's watching. What do they do with their Sundays? How do they talk about exes? How do they spend money when they think nobody's judging? Those details won't light up your dopamine system the same way, but they're the only things that survive the novelty crash. Chemistry that lasts isn't the spark, it's what's left after the spark burns down. Warm drink warmth transfer. Hand someone a steaming mug of tea and watch their shoulders drop half an inch before they even take a sip. That moment is pure neuroscience wearing the disguise of hospitality. Your brain is wired to link physical warmth with emotional safety, and the person holding that cup is already halfway to liking you without knowing why. Researchers call this temperature priming, and it works in real time. When your hands are literally warm, you're more generous, more open, more willing to trust the person across from you. The warmth doesn't just feel good, it triggers the same neural pathways that light up when you remember being held or cared for as a kid, so it lands on old memory, not logic. Here's where it gets sticky. Holding something warm doesn't just make people nicer. It makes them perceive you as warmer, more genuine, more attractive. A hot coffee in their hands while you're talking rewires how they're processing your words in real time. The same conversation over a cold drink lands differently because cold activates defensiveness, while heat activates approach. You're not manipulating them, you're just handing them a cup of tea, but the warmth is doing the heavy lifting in the background, softening their guard before your charm even gets a chance to work. The practical move is simple and honest. Offer warmth. Coffee, tea, hot chocolate, even just holding a warm mug yourself during a conversation. It's not about trickery. It's about recognizing that your body is always talking to their body, whether you mean it to or not. When you share something warm, you're literally transferring a sensation that says, this is safe at a level beneath language, beneath argument, beneath the part of them that stays defended. They'll walk away feeling better about you, and they won't quite know why. They'll just know the conversation felt easier, that you felt more trustworthy, that something about the moment felt like home. Red color arousal priming. You walk into a room, and someone is wearing red. Nothing else changes. The lighting, their words, the temperature. But your pupils dilate slightly. Your heart rate nudges up. Blood pools toward your skin. You don't notice it happening, and neither do they, but the color alone has already begun shifting how your nervous system reads attraction. Red doesn't just sit there. It activates arousal circuitry in your brain before you've consciously registered why she caught your eye, or why he seemed more magnetic in that shirt than in blue. Researchers have shown this dozens of times. People in red are rated as more attractive, more sexually desirable, more dominant. The effect is so automatic, it survives even when you tell yourself you're being rational. Wear the color to an interview, a date, a negotiation, and you've already sent a chemical whisper into the room. Here's where it gets stranger. If you are wearing red, you perform differently. You take more risks, you feel bolder. That is not coincidence. It is priming, working from the inside out. Your nervous system does not distinguish between red is happening to me and red is happening around me. The signal fires the same way. Evolution wired us so that red, ripe fruit, fertile, flushed skin, blood flow, urgency, means something is alive and worth your attention. That hardwiring does not care about your conscious intentions or your fashion choices. It moves you anyway. So when you're trying to read attraction in a room, remember that the red sweater is doing half the work. When you are the one in red, remember that you're not just seen differently. You are primed to act differently too. The color is working before the conversation starts. Golden hour lighting flattery. You've probably noticed how different you look in certain light. Softer, warmer, almost unreasonably luminous. That's not vanity. That's physics conspiring with biology. Golden hour, that stretch of time just before sunset, does something almost unfair. It bathes skin in warm amber wavelengths that smooth texture, blur imperfections, and make every face look like it's being subtly airbrushed by the universe itself. But here's what makes it an attraction trigger rather than just nice lighting. Your brain doesn't separate the glow from the person. It fuses them together. When someone shows up in that light, you don't think, oh, good color temperature. Your nervous system reads healthy skin, youth markers, vitality. The warmth hits ancient circuitry that evolved to notice signs of fertility and vigor. This is why dating apps and Instagram are flooded with golden hour selfies. It's why people choose that time to meet. It's why photographers know that a mediocre photo becomes magnetic when the light shifts, and it works in both directions. The person giving off that glow feels it too. There's a feedback loop. You look better in golden light, so you feel more confident, so you hold yourself differently, so you actually become more attractive. The trigger isn't really the light. It's what the light does to your sense of yourself and how that confidence radiates outward. The catch is that you notice this most acutely when it's absent. Fluorescent office light, bathroom mirror glare, car interior overhead. Suddenly, the same face reads as tired, older, less interesting. Not because anything about you changed. The attraction system is largely indifferent to what's objectively you. It responds to context, shadow, warmth, the angle at which photons hit skin. So if someone catches your eye in a cafe at dusk, but not in daylight, you're not necessarily shallow. You're just human, running on attraction hardware that was wired long before we invented electric bulbs. Scent as a memory anchor. Walk into a room and catch a smell. Cologne, soap, coffee, old paper, and suddenly you're 16 again, sitting in someone's car. That person isn't even in the room. They're just the smell now. Your nose has a direct line to memory that bypasses logic entirely, and that's where attraction lives. Scent doesn't announce itself like a compliment or a text does. It slides in quietly, attaching itself to emotion before your conscious mind gets a vote. When you smell something tied to someone you've liked before, your brain doesn't just remember them. It recreates the feeling, the nervousness, the warmth, the pull. You smell it again on someone new, and suddenly that new person carries the ghost of that old attraction without earning a single thing. It's unfair and magnetic at once. The person who smells like your ex's laundry detergent gets treated like they're mysterious. The one whose shampoo matches someone you loved gets an extra half second of eye contact. You're not choosing this. Your limbic system is choosing it for you. That's why people get tangled up so fast sometimes. Not because the new person is exceptional, but because they're the right smell at the right moment, triggering a memory that feels like chemistry. The reverse is brutal too. Someone checks every box, but their scent is wrong. Too sharp, too safe, too unfamiliar. And the whole thing collapses. Your olfactory bulb connects directly to the amygdala and hippocampus, the same brain structures that encode emotion and memory, which is why a single whiff can flood your body with nostalgia or aversion faster than any other sense. Next time you feel that instant pull toward someone, pause and ask what smell they carry and whether that pull is really theirs or whether you're haunted by something that has nothing to do with who they actually are. Grooming cue asymmetry. You're sitting across from someone at a coffee shop and you notice they've just touched their hair, tucked a strand behind one ear, adjusted their collar. Nothing dramatic. But here's what your nervous system catches before your conscious mind does. That gesture came after they locked eyes with you. They weren't fixing themselves for the mirror or for the room. They were fixing themselves for you. Grooming cues like that are pure honesty, the kind your brain reads like a lie detector. When someone preens in response to your presence, it signals comfort, attraction, and a desire to be perceived a certain way by you specifically. But asymmetry is where the real signal lives. If they groom more on one side of their body than the other when you're around, or if the gesture is slightly incomplete, like they start to tuck their hair but don't finish, or they smooth their shirt but only on one shoulder, it reveals conflict. Part of them wants to appear put together for you. Part of them is nervous, or resisting, or caught between attraction and caution. You'll see this in dating scenarios constantly. The woman who fixes her makeup and then looks away. The guy who straightens his tie only halfway. That asymmetry is not rejection. It's ambivalence made visible. It means they care enough to try, but they're also protecting something. Attraction without a symmetry can feel too easy, too available, too certain. The slight hesitation, the incomplete gesture, the side that looks polished and the side that doesn't. That's where the magnetic tension hides. Your brain knows genuine interest often comes tangled with self-protection. The real pull happens when you see both the reaching toward and the pulling back at the same time. Watch for it in your next conversation, and you'll start noticing how rarely people show up completely open or completely guarded. Most live in that middle ground, and that's exactly where attraction gets interesting. Facial symmetry preference. You walk into a coffee shop and your eye lands on someone across the room. Not because they're conventionally hot, but because something about their face feels right, balanced, settled. There's a good chance what your brain clocked in a millisecond was symmetry, the way their left side mirrors their right, the alignment of features along an invisible center line. It sounds absurdly mathematical, but symmetry reads to your primal hardware as health, genetic fitness, developmental stability. A face that grew evenly suggests fewer infections, better nutrition, fewer environmental insults during childhood. Your attraction isn't reasoning this through, it's just noticing what symmetry whispers before you even know you're looking. You've probably never consciously thought about whether someone's face was symmetrical. You don't line up their nose with imaginary geometry or measure cheekbones, but studies show people consistently rate more symmetrical faces as more attractive across cultures, even when they can't articulate why. Children as young as 3 prefer looking at symmetrical faces. It's wired in, not learned in some magazine or social feed. Your brain came preloaded with this preference, and it runs in the background like an app you never opened. The real trap is believing this preference means anything about depth, that symmetry measures character, worth, or real compatibility. It doesn't. Symmetry is just one frequency your brain happens to tune into, a reflex, not a judgment call. Someone with a slightly asymmetrical face might be magnetic in motion, sharp with humor, kind in ways that symmetry never hints at, and attraction based purely on facial balance burns out fast because a face you see every day becomes invisible. What keeps someone actually interesting is novelty, effort, vulnerability, how they make you feel when they're tired or laughing. So if you've noticed yourself drawn to a particular face shape, that's worth knowing about yourself. Not as a character flaw, but as a clue about your wiring. The next move isn't to fight it or feel guilty. It's to stay curious enough to look past it. Averageness attraction bias. The faces that stick with you in a crowd are rarely the ones that blend in, yet your body keeps reaching for them anyway. Think about why you might find yourself drawn to someone who looks a little like everyone, rather than someone with extreme or unusual features. There's a quiet reason for this, and it has nothing to do with blandness. Your brain, over thousands of years of evolution, learned that average traits signal genetic diversity and health. A face that blends multiple features well suggests fewer genetic mutations, stronger immune function, symmetry without weirdness. When you average dozens of faces together digitally, the result is often rated as more attractive than any individual face in the set. It's not that average equals beautiful, it's that your attraction system reads averageness as trustworthy, stable, safe, the kind of person whose genes won't surprise you. The flip side gnaws quietly. We tend to overlook people with truly distinctive features, a sharp nose, asymmetrical eyes, an unusual bone structure, even when those features might be striking or memorable. They register as different, which your ancient brain coded as unknown risk, even though in modern life, different is just different, not danger. What makes this bias sticky is that it operates completely beneath awareness. You don't consciously think, this person looks like a composite of healthy traits. You just feel a quiet pull toward familiarity. Marketing knows this cold. Beauty brands average faces across their campaigns, smoothing and blending until the model looks like everyone's type, which paradoxically makes them compelling to almost no one in particular, yet everyone in aggregate. The reframe worth sitting with. If you find yourself consistently drawn to a certain look, pause and ask whether you're chasing actual chemistry or just the comfort of recognizing a pattern. Sometimes the person who stops your breath is the one your brain initially marked as too different. And that rupture in the familiar is exactly where real attraction can grow. Physical elevation and height. Stand next to someone on a step or slight raise and you'll feel it immediately. A micro shift in how your body relates to theirs. Height matters more than we admit. When someone is literally looking down at you, Even by a few inches, something primal wakes up. It's not about the inches themselves. It's about what your nervous system reads as spaciousness, stability, command. People who sit higher in a room, on a bar stool, a raised platform, even leaning against a counter while you're seated, trigger a quiet attraction mechanism that has nothing to do with their face or words. You are reading verticality as a signal. Taller people get this advantage in dating apps, job interviews, and first meetings, but the real game is steeper than just genetics. A woman in heels shifts her center, elongates her line, and suddenly she's not just taller, she's claiming vertical space. A man who stands straight instead of slouched doesn't just look confident, he's broadcasting that he takes up room without apology. This is why posture bleeds into attraction so fast. Your body reads elevation as access to resources, visibility, or safety. Ancient cues that still fire in modern brains. The person standing tall looks like they can see the horizon. The person leaning back in a chair with their head slightly elevated signals ease and control. You don't consciously think, this person is higher, therefore I'm attracted. Instead, you feel a subtle magnetic pull, a readiness to listen, a small deference that makes their words land heavier. If you've ever noticed how much more interesting someone becomes when they walk into a room with their shoulders back and chin level, you've felt this trigger working below the surface. It's not vanity to understand this geometry. It's recognizing that attraction is partly mathematics, and sometimes the elevation does half the work before a word is spoken. Pre-selection by other women. Walk into a bar and notice a man sitting alone, totally unremarkable. Now watch 3 women gravitating toward him, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm. Suddenly, something shifts in how you see him. You didn't learn anything new about his personality or looks, but your brain just got a signal. Other women have already vetted him. He passed the test. This is pre-selection, and it works on you whether you want it to or not. The mechanism is brutally simple. Evolution wired us to use social proof as a shortcut. If other women find him valuable, the odds he actually is valuable just jumped. You don't have to spend time figuring it out yourself. The hard work is done. A man who gets attention from multiple women seems higher status, more confident, more worth your time than a man surrounded by empty chairs. What you're really attracted to isn't the fact of being chosen by other women, so much as what that fact signals about him, that he's socially skilled, that he's desirable, that he's not desperate. The trap is that pre-selection can override almost everything else. A man can be unkind, boring, or wrong for you on paper, but if you see other women wanting him, your gut hijacks your judgment. You start wondering what you're missing. You reframe red flags as quirks. You move faster than you would have alone. It's not about him becoming more attractive. It's about the social proof making you less cautious, less critical, more willing to invest before you've really looked. Stay honest with your own instincts by noticing when you're speeding up because of his social currency rather than because of who he actually is. The women around him might be right, or they might just be reading the same false signal you're reading. Pay attention to how you feel when you're alone with him. That's closer to the truth. Social proof of laughter. You walk into a room where 3 people are already laughing at something. You have no idea what the joke was, but something in you wants to join them, not because you heard the punchline, but because their laughter tells your brain that something good is happening here, and you don't want to be left outside it. That magnetic pull, that's social proof doing its work on your nervous system. When someone laughs in a group, especially someone you respect or find attractive, their laughter becomes a shorthand that says, this is a safe, fun space. And safety is deeply attractive. Your brain doesn't run the full analysis. It just registers. Others are already comfortable here, so maybe I can be too. The person who laughed becomes subtly more magnetic because they've signaled that they belong, that they understand what's funny, that they're in the loop. You trust them more without knowing why. This is why canned laughter on old sitcoms actually worked, and why comedians seed their audiences with people trained to laugh at the right moments. It's also why the quiet person who makes one perfectly timed joke gets remembered as hilarious, while the person trying too hard gets forgotten. The laughter of others becomes a social contract written in sound. It says, join us. When someone is relaxed enough, confident enough to both trigger and ride the wave of group laughter, they become irresistible. They're not trying to be funny, they're just present enough to let the funny happen around them. Watch someone who doesn't care if others laugh. Notice how it changes the room, how people lean in harder, how the air shifts. The absence of that desperate need for approval becomes its own kind of proof. And proof, any kind, is what makes attraction stick. You're not drawn to the person because they made you laugh. You're drawn to them because other people already felt safe enough to laugh with them. Perceived exclusivity of access. You notice someone gets invited to things you don't, not better things necessarily, just different things, and suddenly they feel more interesting, even if you barely knew them before. That's the sting of scarcity working backward. The moment access feels limited, the person behind that access feels valuable. It works whether they're intentionally creating distance or just living their life. A friend who's harder to reach becomes the one you actually think about. A person who doesn't post much becomes magnetic to the people scrolling past silence. You don't want them more because they're better. You want them because you can't have them as easily as you can have everyone else. The brain treats restricted access like forbidden knowledge. It must be worth something, or why would it be hard to get? This is why the person in the room who leaves early often gets remembered longer than the one who stayed the whole party. Why someone who says no sometimes feels more authentic than someone always available. Why a text back in an hour feels personal when an immediate response feels obligatory. The trap is that people often confuse this feeling with genuine chemistry. They mistake the friction of limited access for the warmth of real connection. Someone busy becomes someone mysterious. Someone with boundaries becomes someone who has their life together. And the person on the receiving end of this dynamic, the one perceived as scarce, rarely has to do much. They just have to exist with less visibility, less availability, less eagerness to please. They become the prize by doing less. The cruelest part, half the attraction is theater, but it never feels like theater while you're in it. If you're watching yourself drawn to someone, worth pausing for a second. Are you attracted to them, or are you attracted to the feeling of not having them? Because once the scarcity dissolves, once they text back right away, once they say yes to everything, so does half the pull. Scarcity through prior commitments. You notice someone is booked, not just busy. They have a real, existing life that doesn't revolve around you. Maybe they mention they've got plans Saturday, or they're already committed to a project, or they're loyal to people who came first. Something shifts in you. Suddenly they feel less available, which makes them feel more valuable. This is scarcity through prior commitments, and it works because it proves they're not desperate. A person with nothing to do but wait for you to call looks like they have unlimited time. A person who has to schedule you in, who has to fit you around something that already matters to them, looks like someone worth rearranging for. The psychological trick here is that commitments signal maturity, consistency, and depth. They show you're not just being offered someone's leftover attention, you're being offered a slice of their real world. And we want the slice more when we know someone else wants the whole pie. But here's where it gets sticky. This works best when the commitment is genuine, not performed. Fake busyness reads like avoidance. Real commitments to people, projects, or principles read like character. So when you're attracted to someone who has a full life, who can't drop everything, who won't rearrange their week on a whim, you're often picking up on something real, that they have standards, stability, and things they care about. The scarcity isn't manufactured, it's actual. That's why it sticks. The inverse trap is easy to fall into too. If you're always available, always rearrangeable, you accidentally signal that you don't have anything else pulling on you. Not many people find that compelling. The quietest power move is having a life so real and full that someone else has to earn their place in it. So invest in your own commitments first, not as a tactic, but as the real thing. Intermittent attention scarcity. You text someone and they reply instantly, then you text again and radio silence for 3 hours, then a rapid-fire string of messages, then nothing for a day. That unpredictability is what does it, not the attention itself, but the fact that you can't predict when it's coming. Your brain treats sporadic rewards like a slot machine. When the payout is guaranteed, you check once. When it's random, you can't stop checking. This is why someone who replies to every message can feel less magnetic than someone who sometimes vanishes. It's not cruelty or strategy that matters most. It's that when attention becomes sparse and uneven, your nervous system treats it like a prize you have to earn. You begin to wonder what you did right when they replied fast. You replay what you said during the silence. That loop of wondering is the hook, and it gets tighter every time they go quiet. The brutal part is that genuine people, swallowed by work, wrestling with anxiety, or just careless with their phone, end up triggering this effect without trying. They're not playing games. They're just unavailable in waves. But your attachment system doesn't distinguish between strategy and circumstance. It only registers that their attention is unreliable, which feels scarce, which feels precious. You start performing for consistency without noticing it. You text less so they notice you more. You become smaller, more careful, more watchful. You're training yourself to chase randomness because your brain learned that unpredictable attention is worth pursuing. If that cycle sounds familiar, pause and ask yourself, am I drawn to them or drawn to the uncertainty of their availability? The answer often reveals whether you're chasing a person or chasing the feeling of chase itself. Withholding easy approval. You know the person who laughs at everything you say, nods along, tells you you're great, and somehow you feel nothing. Then there's the one who listens hard, disagrees sometimes, and makes you feel like you actually earned their regard. The difference is approval scarcity. When praise flows free, it becomes background noise. When it's rare and specific, it becomes currency. This is why parents who say, "I'm proud of you for showing up," hit harder than parents who say it for breathing. Your brain registers the signal. This person doesn't hand out gold stars. Their belief actually means something. In attraction, the same lever works. Someone who approves of you immediately, who sees you and just smiles and agrees, creates no tension, no reason to prove anything, no hunger to be chosen. But someone who is genuinely hard to impress, who makes you wonder what they really think, who gives compliments that land like they cost something, that person makes you want to show up better, not because they're cruel or withholding in a game-playing way, but because their standards are real. They like you, but they wouldn't like anyone. That distinction is magnetic. The trap is thinking you need to be cold or play hard to get in a calculated way. You don't. Genuine selectivity, actually having standards, actually noticing instead of just flattering, reads as confidence and self-respect. You approve of people who meet your bar, not everyone. You find things genuinely interesting, or you don't. You laugh when something's actually funny. That realness, that refusal to be a vending machine of validation, makes people want to earn what you think of them. It's not a game or performance. It's just having a backbone, and a backbone is one of the quietest, stickiest things another person can feel in a room with you. Approval given then paused. There's a moment that happens almost every time someone finds you attractive. They give you a compliment or a smile, and then their expression shifts, just barely. They catch themselves mid-warmth. Maybe they worry they've been too forward. Maybe they suddenly remember a reason to hold back. What you just felt is the reverse psychology of attraction, working at full throttle, and it's wildly more magnetic than consistent approval ever could be. When someone approves of you completely and holds that approval steady, your nervous system settles. You relax, you know where you stand. But when approval arrives and then gets yanked back, when a laugh drops into silence, when an admiring glance turns cautious, when genuine interest suddenly looks like they're second-guessing themselves, your brain wakes up. It scrambles to figure out what just happened. Did you do something wrong? Did they lose interest? Your mind starts working harder to recapture what it just felt. This is why people become obsessed with the mixed signal crushes, the ones who are warm, then distant, who seem into you and then pull away. Your nervous system cannot rest because the reward, their approval, is not guaranteed. It's intermittent, and intermittent rewards are the most addictive pattern in human psychology. They're what keeps people pulling slot machine levers. The attraction trigger here isn't the approval itself. It's the approval followed by the pause. It's the moment they seem to want you and then seem unsure. You start investing energy to tip the scale back toward the warmth you just felt. And in that effort, you begin to feel more for them. This is worth knowing about yourself. You may be drawn most to people who are inconsistent with their warmth, not because they're right for you, but because your nervous system finds their uncertainty addictive. The steadier person, the one who clearly, consistently approves of you, might actually be safer, but they won't keep your brain awake the same way. Push-pull warmth calibration. You know the feeling. Someone gives you their full attention, makes you feel genuinely seen, and then without warning, they pull back. Not cruelty, just a shift. A text goes unanswered for hours. They mention they're overwhelmed. They show up excited to see you, then bring up something that creates a small gap between you. Your nervous system tightens, and you lean forward, suddenly hyper-aware of them. That's push-pull warmth calibration in action. The rhythm of being close enough to feel safe, then distant enough to feel the loss, then close again. It works because your brain is genuinely wired to seek consistency in people you care about, and the moment it breaks, you become obsessed with restoring it. Your attention locks on. You want to predict them, to figure out what will bring them back, which makes them unforgettable in a way that steady kindness rarely is. The most charismatic people, some intentionally, some accidentally, have learned to use this rhythm like currency, a tender message followed by a day of silence, full presence followed by a small withdrawal. It's not always manipulation. Sometimes it's just how inconsistent, tired, or defended people naturally are. But whether it's conscious or not, the effect is identical. You're in a perpetual recalibration loop, spending more energy reading them than enjoying them. Here's where the trap sets. You might call it love, but it's attraction wearing love's costume. Real safety doesn't flicker. It holds steady even when someone steps away. So watch for the pattern, not one push-pull moment, but whether the cycle repeats in a way that always leaves you chasing. If you're consistently working harder to earn their warmth back, then they're working to keep it stable. You're not in a relationship. You're in a game where they've learned exactly how to keep you looking. The people worth staying for are the ones whose warmth doesn't depend on your performance. Their care stays constant because it never became your job to maintain it in the first place. Qualifying the other person. You've got this backwards if you think attraction lives in being impressive. The real current runs the other way. It lives in making the other person feel like they need to be impressive for you. When you ask real questions instead of fishing for compliments. When you gently doubt something they said or push back on a claim. When you seem genuinely unimpressed by the surface things they thought mattered. Something shifts in their chest. They lean in. They work harder. They start rehearsing conversations with you in their head, turning the moment over like a puzzle they need to solve. Suddenly, attraction flows in a direction they didn't expect, and they're the one reaching. Think about the last time someone you liked didn't immediately validate you. Maybe they said, "That's interesting, but aren't you being a little defensive about that?" Or, "I'm not sure that's actually true." Or simply didn't laugh at your joke the way you thought they would. You probably thought about them more that day, not less. You probably wanted to come back and make them see things your way, or prove you were right, or earn their approval. That quiet doubt, it made them matter. The trap is overdoing it and becoming mean or dismissive. Real qualifying is surgical, specific, rooted in actual standards. Not, "You're pretty basic," but most people your age think travel is personality, but I sense there's more with you. Not playing hard to get in some obvious game, but genuinely being hard to impress and letting them see the criteria matter. When someone feels like they have to meet your real standards, not perform for your approval, but actually be someone worth your time, attraction becomes something they work for, and things people work for stick around. Selective disagreement credibility. Watch what happens when someone agrees with you on most things, but then, carefully, thoughtfully, disagrees on one. You don't feel attacked. You feel heard. There's something about a person who can nod along and then gently say, "I see it differently on this one," that makes you lean in instead of pull away. That's selective disagreement, credibility, and it rewires how attractive someone feels in a conversation. Most people think agreement is the currency of likability, more nods, more warmth, more attraction. But neuroscience tells a quieter story. When someone agrees with everything you say, part of your brain flags it as unreliable flattery or autopilot listening. The moment they disagree, selectively, not as a habit, something shifts. Now they're not just echoing you, they're thinking. They're risking your approval by being honest, which signals they have something real to offer. Here's the magnetic part. Selective disagreement only works when the agreement is real and abundant first. If someone challenges you constantly, that's just argument. But if they've proven they actually get you, and then they say, "Actually, I think you're wrong about this," you don't feel criticized. You feel evaluated by someone who knows the difference. That evaluation feels like respect. You notice this in people who attract you effortlessly. They're not people pleasers pretending to be themselves. They're people who say, "I love that about you, and here's where I see it differently." It creates a weird asymmetry in your mind. They must be discerning if they're willing to disagree. They must like you if they bother to explain themselves. You unconsciously assume someone who selectively disagrees is holding themselves to a higher standard and choosing you anyway. That small friction, paradoxically, builds more trust than seamless agreement ever could. The vulnerability of their disagreement signals they're not performing, they're present. The next time you're tempted to nod along, try that one honest disagreement instead. Watch how it lands. Compliment on the unobvious. Someone notices your laugh, not your smile, but the particular way you laugh, how your whole face changes. They mention how you tilt your head when you're really listening, or that you always tip the barista, or that you remember details about people's lives they didn't think they'd told you. That moment, something shifts beneath the surface. Most compliments are surface noise. You're pretty, you're smart. Everyone hears those, and they bounce off without sticking. But the unobvious ones land different because they signal someone was actually paying attention. They were watching, not in a creepy way, in the way that means you're not just another another person in their orbit. You're textured to them. You have specificity. When someone compliments something about you that only emerges over time, something deeper gets activated. It signals that they didn't just glance, they studied. They noticed what makes you, you, not what makes anyone attractive. Maybe how you phrase things, or the fact that you never interrupt, or the way you light up talking about a specific topic, or how you handle a moment when you're wrong. The real trigger here isn't flattery, it's recognition. And recognition is one of the deepest human hungers we carry. It's also why this works in both directions. If you want someone to feel genuinely seen, stop leading with the obvious. Don't compliment the haircut everyone noticed. Notice how they engage with the world. Notice what they do when they think no one's watching. Notice the small kindnesses, the particular ways they think, the details that took time to reveal. That's not manipulation, that's intimacy. The other person feels it immediately. This isn't generic praise bouncing off their surface. You just told them, without saying it directly, that they matter enough to be known. And that rewires attraction faster than almost anything else available to you. Specificity over flattery. Someone tells you you're amazing and you feel almost nothing. Then someone else says, the way you explained that thing to me last week, I still think about how you made it click. And suddenly, you're seeing them differently. Why does the second one land so hard? Because it proves they were actually paying attention. Generic praise is free. Specificity costs focus. When someone remembers a detail about you, not your job title or your Instagram aesthetic, but something you did or said or thought, their brain was literally working on you when you weren't in the room. That's not flattery. That's evidence of genuine notice. Most people cruise through interactions half asleep, nodding along, waiting for their turn to talk. When you actually track the small moves someone makes, the joke they make when they're nervous, the way they listen harder when the topic matters to them, that specific thing they care about that nobody else gets, and you call it out, you're saying something radical. I see you as a real person, not a projection. It's terrifying for the other person because it means you could be dangerous. You could actually disappoint them now because you're not abstract anymore. But that danger is also arousal. It's the difference between being complimented and being known. The trap is trying to manufacture specificity. Forced observations feel toxic, like you're running a script instead of actually present. The real move is actual noticing, not remembering facts for later deployment, but genuinely tracking what matters to them, what makes them light up, what they're quietly proud of, the small contradictions in how they show up. Then when it comes out naturally, it's not a rehearsed line. It's just you saying what you actually saw. And that directness is magnetic because it's rare. That's what rewires the nervous system. That's what makes someone think about you when you're gone. Noticing what everyone else missed. You walk into a room and someone glances toward the corner where the light is bad, the chair nobody sits in, the small crack in the plaster nobody mentions. They just saw it. They saw what 17 other people had walked past without registering, and somehow that act of seeing, that tiny, careful attention to what doesn't matter, makes them magnetic. People find themselves leaning toward whoever notices the details. It feels like intelligence. It feels like care. It feels like someone who is actually present instead of just existing in the room on autopilot. When you catch yourself noticing the small thing, the way someone's voice got quieter, the book on their shelf that's worn at the spine, the care that went into something small they made, you are transmitting a signal without saying a word. You are saying, I am awake. I am not just consuming you like everyone else. I actually looked. And attraction, at its core, is often relief. Relief that someone finally paid attention. Relief that you are not invisible. The trap is that most people notice nothing because they are running a mental script instead of actually inhabiting their senses. They are thinking about what to say next, or checking their phone, or replaying an old conversation. They are not here. But someone who has genuinely noticed something small about you, something you didn't even know you were broadcasting, has done the rarest thing. They chose to see you rather than the version of you they expected. That is why people follow photographers, artists, therapists, good listeners into rooms and keep coming back. Not because those people are always saying the right thing, because they are the ones who bothered to look. The next time you are with someone, try turning off the script and letting your eyes actually work. Notice the thing. Don't comment on it necessarily. Just let them feel seen. That feeling is worth more than 1,000 compliments you didn't mean. Remembering a throwaway detail. Someone mentions offhand that they hate cilantro, or they light up when a certain song plays, or they always twist their napkin when they're nervous. You forget it instantly. It's not important enough to store. Then, 3 weeks later, you remember, not because you tried to, not because it matters, you just did. And when you bring it up, watch what happens in their eyes. They blink. They pause. A small smile spreads because you were listening when you didn't have to. You cared enough to notice something they didn't even know they'd said. That moment is the whole attraction trigger. It works because it proves something nobody gets tired of hearing. You see me, not the polished version, not the resume, the small, true details that only show up when someone's not performing. When you remember that they mentioned their sister's name in a throwaway comment, or that they got quiet when someone brought up a certain topic, or that they take their coffee darker than they claim they like it. You're sending a signal that cuts through all the noise. You paid attention. You were present. You didn't check your phone while they were talking. The trap is trying too hard. The magic dies the moment it becomes a calculated move, something you write down to deploy later. It has to be real, the kind of thing that surfaces naturally because you are actually listening, not performing the role of someone who listens. And that's why it hits so hard. In a world where most people are waiting for their turn to talk, remembering the small stuff is a form of intimacy that costs you almost nothing except presence. It's the smallest way of saying you matter enough to let you stick around in my head, even when you're not trying. That feeling is rare. That feeling is magnetic. That feeling is also irreplaceable, which means the next time someone tells you something small, let it land instead of letting it disappear. Delayed callback to a detail. Someone mentions they love old jazz records, and you nod and move on. 3 weeks later, you text them a link to a rare Miles Davis bootleg you found. The magic isn't in the gift, it's that you remembered. You cared enough to hold that thread, let it sit in your mind, and circle back when it mattered. That callback does something subtle and almost invisible. It tells them they are not a one-time audience. They are worth revisiting. Most people live in the now. We forget what we said yesterday by tomorrow. But when someone retrieves something small you mentioned weeks ago, a book you were curious about, a restaurant you wanted to try, a dream you half joked about, it lands differently. It says, I was thinking about you when you weren't in the room. I'm not just reacting, I'm remembering. This works because it breaks the default rhythm of connection. We expect attention to happen in real time. Someone listens to you, you feel heard, but delayed callback triggers something deeper. It suggests you live in their thoughts between conversations. The gap itself becomes proof. And here is the part that makes it so potent. You cannot fake it. You cannot pretend to remember something you did not actually hold on to. There is no performance that lands as well as genuine recall. You either thought about them or you did not. So when you do, and then act on it, it reads as authentic in a world that has trained us all to be skeptical of attention. The people who do this, who listen for the small details, the hesitation, the offhand comment, the thing mentioned once, they let those moments live in them for a while. Then they come back with it. The delay is the whole point. It is proof that someone is not just present with you, they are still thinking about you when you leave the room. Callback humor as shared history. You're sitting across from someone and they say something that makes no sense to anyone in the room except you, and suddenly you both crack up. That moment isn't just funny, it's intimate. It's a tiny proof that you exist in each other's world, that you have a language nobody else speaks, that there's a before you met and an after, and they remember it like you do. Callbacks work because they collapse time. They say, that awkward Tuesday we had, or remember how bad you were at that thing. And both of you are suddenly there again, but this time laughing together instead of alone. It's not the joke itself, it's the fact that it requires knowing someone. It requires being in the inside. The neurological thing happening is dead simple. Your brain loves recognition and pattern completion. Hearing something familiar feels good, but hearing something that is only familiar to two people, that triggers a small belonging response. You feel chosen, you feel seen, and attraction is often just the feeling of being known. When someone gets your references, remembers your stories, can predict what will make you laugh, they've become part of your internal landscape. There's a reason couples fall deeper when they develop inside jokes. There's a reason you'll stay longer with someone who can call back to your worst moment from 3 weeks ago and somehow make it tender instead of cruel. The callback is a tiny contract. It says, I listened, I kept it, it mattered enough to stick. And that stickiness, that proof of attention, is magnetic. If you're trying to build real connection with someone, stop trying to be universally funny. Learn what lands with them specifically. Remember one small strange thing they said. Circle back to it weeks later. Watch what happens when you do. The attraction isn't in the punchline. It's in the fact that you're the only two people on Earth who get it. Shared inside vocabulary. You and someone develop a private language without planning it. A running joke, a nickname, a weird word you both use for something no one else would say. The first time they use it with you in public and no one else laughs, there's this tiny electric moment. You're suddenly a team of two. That small linguistic conspiracy is one of the stickiest attraction glues there is, and it works because it creates belonging at the speed of speech. When someone knows your shorthand, the things you abbreviate, the names you call, situations, the way you say things that make zero sense to strangers, they've essentially proven they've been paying attention to you specifically, not the version you present to crowds, the one that lives in your small moments. This is why couples who've been together for years sometimes sound like they're speaking in code to everyone else. It's not pretentious or weird. It's the accumulated proof of intimacy. The person starts using your words. They remember the joke from 6 months ago. They know exactly which inflection you mean when you say something bland. And when they deploy that vocabulary back at you, when they quote something you said or use a phrase the way you taught them, your nervous system registers it as deep recognition. You've left marks on how they speak. That's intoxicating. It signals that you matter enough to change someone's actual behavior, not just their opinion of you. Watch this happen in early attraction. Two people start finishing sentences, borrowing phrases, developing running bits. The outsiders don't get why they're laughing. That opacity, that sense of being on the inside of something, makes both people want to stay inside it. Build that vocabulary early. Use their words back. The language you share becomes the walls of your private world together, and people are desperate for a world where they belong. Nickname ownership effect. There's a moment early in connection when someone stops using your full name and starts calling you something shorter, weirder, more theirs. Maybe it's a compression of what you're called, or a private joke, or some random sound that's stuck. The second they do it, the second you catch yourself responding to it without correction, something shifts in the nervous system. You have just been claimed in the gentlest possible way. What makes this so magnetic is that nicknames feel like permission. They collapse distance. Your full name is formal, boundaried, the thing HR uses. A nickname is the name your people use. The moment someone invents one for you, they are declaring, I see you well enough to rename you. I have earned the right to make you smaller and more familiar in my mouth. And because humans are wired to trust people who know us, we trust them a fraction of a degree more. We relax around them. The sneaky part is that this works both ways. If you call someone by a nickname early, and it sticks, and they let it, they start feeling like you belong to them. Their brain releases a tiny dose of ownership. You are no longer generic. You are the person who gets called that one thing by them specifically. The exclusivity is its own gravity. They will think of you more often, text you first, defend you in conversation, because in some quiet way, they've already decided you matter. You've probably felt this without naming it. Someone who uses your real nickname when they're comfortable with you, but your formal name when they're annoyed or distant. That shift is real. It's a dial they're turning. If you want to deepen attraction early, borrow this. Learn what someone wants to be called in private, use it consistently, and let them feel the world get a little smaller and warmer because of you. Name repetition warmth. You're at a coffee shop and the barista calls out your name when your order's ready. Something small shifts in you. Not because the coffee tastes different, but because hearing your own name out loud carries a tiny hit of recognition. Now flip it. Imagine that same barista remembers your name the next time you come in and uses it naturally in conversation. Suddenly, they're not just someone behind the counter. They feel like they actually see you. This is not manipulation. It's neurology. Your brain lights up differently when your name is spoken aloud by another person, especially in a warm context. Studies show that hearing your own name activates the anterior cingulate cortex and medial prefrontal regions, the areas that process self-relevance and social connection. When someone uses your name while smiling, making eye contact, or genuinely engaging with you, your nervous system reads it as, you matter to this person. You are not invisible. The warmth comes from the combination, not just the name alone. A cold recitation of your name feels weird, but a name used in a moment of real attention? That sticks. Here is where it gets sneaky. People who are naturally good at this, who remember names and use them, often seem more likable, more trustworthy, more magnetic, but they are not doing anything extraordinary. They are simply activating your own need to feel known. The trap is that it works in reverse too. If someone uses your name repeatedly in an artificial way, trying too hard, or in a sales pitch, you feel the friction immediately. Your system knows the difference between genuine recognition and tactical deployment. So the real trigger is not the name itself. It is the authenticity of attention that surrounds it. Next time someone uses your name naturally in conversation, notice that small warmth Then notice when it feels forced. That gap between the two is where attraction actually lives. Manufactured minor conspiracy. There's a moment in every budding connection when someone leans in and whispers something like, "Okay, but nobody else gets this," or "I'm telling you this because I know you'll actually understand." That tiny shared secret, real or invented, hits different. You suddenly feel chosen, trusted, like you and this person are on the same team against the rest of the world. It doesn't matter if the conspiracy is a small complaint about a mutual friend, a joke about how stupid everyone else's taste is, or even something harmless like, "I hate that everyone thinks I'm the serious type, but you know I'm actually funny." The mechanism is almost mechanical. Exclusion creates belonging. Whisper culture makes the whispered to feel special, and attraction follows because you are no longer just another person in their life. You are the person who gets it, who gets them. The trap is how easily this scales. A tiny inside joke becomes a running narrative. We're the only ones who see through this crowd. Nobody would understand what we have. That small us versus them binary can grow into something that isolates you from actual friends, actual reality checks, actual people who might point out that the conspiracy is just smoke. The most seductive version is when the other person confesses something vulnerable under the guise of sharing a secret. Suddenly, you are holding their truth, and the weight of that feels like intimacy. But intimacy and isolation can look nearly identical from the inside. Watch whether the conspiracy keeps you connected to the world or slowly cordons you off from it. Real closeness doesn't need an enemy to survive, and the people worth keeping around don't make you choose between them and everyone else. When you notice yourself thinking, "Nobody would get this but you," pause and ask who else could. That small question is often enough to let real air back in. Us against the room framing. You walk into a crowded party with someone you barely know, and suddenly you're both quietly laughing at the same awkward joke nobody else gets. In that instant, the room falls away. It's not the joke itself. It's the fact that you two saw it the same way and everyone else missed it. That's the architecture of us against the room, and it creates instant alliance because it births a shared worldview. When someone becomes your silent co-conspirator in noticing something about the environment, the weird energy in a conversation, the unspoken social tension, the absurdity of a moment, you're not just sharing humor. You're wordlessly saying, "We think alike, we see through the same lens, we're on the same team." Suddenly, you're not two people in a room, you're two people against it. This framing flips the social hierarchy. Instead of both trying to impress the group, you've both implicitly decided the group doesn't define what happens between you. The shared skepticism becomes intimacy, a raised eyebrow across a table, a text during an event. Are you seeing this? A knowing look when someone says something obviously false. These tiny moments of synchronized outsider status pack enormous magnetism because they signal, "I trust you enough to show you my real thoughts, not my curated self." The person who makes you feel like you're both observers of the world rather than subjects within it becomes dangerously compelling. And here's where it gets tricky. That alignment blinds you to incompatibilities that might matter more. You're so busy enjoying the intimacy of being understood that you stop asking whether the person deserves to be on your team at all. The us feeling is so rewarding, it can override other signals entirely. Notice the next time someone makes you feel like an insider with them. It's magnetic. Just remember, shared mockery of the outside world is not the same as shared values about what actually matters. Cooperative task alliance. You ever notice how people fall a little harder for someone they had to problem solve with? Not the person who hands you the answer on a plate, the person who sat next to you, confused, until you both figured it out. That's cooperative task alliance at work, and it's wired so deep, most people miss it happening. Here's why it lands. When you and someone else move toward a shared goal, your nervous systems synchronize. You're breathing together in a room. Your attention is pointed the same direction. There's no stage, no performance, just two minds bumping against the same puzzle. That creates something neuroscience calls we-ness. Not the fake kind you perform for a crowd, but the real kind that only forms through mutual effort. The magic isn't that you solved something, it's that you were vulnerable in the solving. You asked a dumb question, they admitted they didn't know either. You both tried something that didn't work. That shared incompetence, that willingness to be messy in front of each other, it rewires attraction faster than 100 polished conversations ever could. Watch it in motion. Two people collaborating on a work project, building something together, even cooking a meal where they actually need need each other's hands. By the end, something has shifted. They're laughing about the disaster. They made meaning together. They're not just thinking about each other. They're thinking with each other. If you want to deepen someone's attachment to you, don't perform. Create a small task that requires both of you. Not a test, not a trick. Something genuinely collaborative, where the outcome is uncertain and both of you matter. A puzzle, a project, a problem that's interesting enough to focus on, but small enough to finish. The bonding happens not in the talking, but in the doing. In those moments where you're both leaning in, figuring it out, real and unguarded. Shared struggle, bonding. You know that moment when someone you barely knew suddenly becomes your person, not because they're perfect, but because they showed up when things fell apart. That's shared struggle bonding, and it's one of the fastest human connectors there is. Your brain doesn't bond over smooth sailing, it bonds over trenches. When you and someone else are both fighting the same difficult thing, a bad project deadline, a family mess, a mutual friend's crisis, even just the low-grade suffering of being broke. Something shifts. You're not performing for each other anymore. The masks come down because survival mode doesn't have room for them. Vulnerability becomes contagious. You see someone else's raw fear or frustration, and suddenly your own feels less lonely. The person who holds space while you're falling apart is someone your nervous system will cling to. That's not romantic, necessarily. That's chemistry. Here's the trap, though. People often mistake intensity for love. A whirlwind relationship born in crisis feels electric because your bodies are flooded with the same stress hormones, the same adrenaline, the same raw need. It feels like you've found your person. But once the storm passes and the struggle ends, some of that shine fades because the bond was built on shared pain, not shared values or vision. The attraction was real. But it was real because you were both drowning together, and that's not always the same as choosing each other on solid ground. This doesn't mean struggle-born connections are fake. It means pay attention to whether you stay drawn to someone when things calm down. The people worth keeping around are the ones who bond with you in the storm and stay gentle with you in the quiet after. The real test isn't how magnetic someone feels when the world is on fire. It's whether they still matter when the fire goes out. That's the difference between borrowed attraction and something worth building on. Benjamin Franklin favor effect. There's a counterintuitive move that Benjamin Franklin discovered in his own life. If you want someone to like you, don't just do them favors, ask them for one instead. Sounds backwards, right? But here's what actually happens. When you ask someone for help, a real ask, not a trivial one, their brain rewires how they see you. They begin to justify why they said yes. And in that justification, they unconsciously decide you must be worth liking. You become more valuable to them, not less. It's not logic, it's narrative repair. Your brain hates cognitive dissonance. So if you spent an hour helping someone move, your mind searches for a reason that makes sense. I must care about this person. The more effort they invest in you, the more they're forced to believe in you. This is why the people who've done the most for us often feel more bonded to us than we feel to them, and it flips everything we think about attraction and obligation. We assume people like us more when we give, but the opposite often holds. Ask for help and you're not burdening them. You're giving them a reason to decide you're likable. The catch is timing and calibration. A massive ask from a stranger reads as manipulation. A tiny ask from someone you've just met lands as insulting. The sweet spot is modest, genuine, and early enough that they can feel like they chose to help. A small loan. Advice on something they actually care about. A ride, a name. The moment they do it, the mental machinery starts turning. They're defending their choice. They're deciding who you are based on what they did for you. So if you want to be magnetically attractive to someone, don't lead with generosity. Lead by putting a small, real piece of the work in their hands. Let them become your advocate before they even know that's what happened. Helping request as vulnerability. You're sitting across someone and they say, "I don't suppose you could help me with this." Not a demand, not a command, a soft question mark at the end of a sentence they could have handled alone. Something shifts. Suddenly, they're smaller, more real, less like the polished version they show the world, and you feel it pull at you. This is the hidden mechanics of attraction. Vulnerability creates permission for closeness. When someone asks for help, they're not just requesting your labor. They're handing you proof that they need you, that they can't do everything solo, that you matter enough to ask. Your brain reads this as, "I trust you enough to show you where I crack." That trust is currency in attraction. The person doing the asking doesn't have to be weak or broken. They just have to be honest about the gap between what they can do and what they're facing. A brilliant surgeon asking for a recipe recommendation. A confident friend admitting they're lost with their kid. A person you barely know saying, I have no idea how to fix this, and I'm hoping you do. Each one is a small door opening. You get to step through and matter. And here's the part most people miss. Being asked to help is not the same as being asked to rescue. The vulnerable ask creates a moment of mutual reality. You have something they need right now. They're brave enough to name it, and suddenly you're both standing in the same room instead of across a stage. The attraction isn't about pity or savior instinct. It's about being chosen. It's about the permission to see someone as they actually are. Next time you want to create closeness with someone, ask for something real. Not a test, not a manipulation, an actual place where you're genuinely stuck and genuinely need them. Watch what happens. Effort investment sunk cost. There's a reason people fall harder for someone after months of pursuit than after weeks of ease. You've already paid in. Time, vulnerability, those awkward conversations, the small rejections you pushed through. Your brain doesn't want that currency to vanish, so it retrofits the person you chased into someone more valuable, more rare, more worthy of the toll. This isn't love yet. It's economics wearing love's costume. Watch it happen in real time. Someone texts back slowly for 3 months. You keep reaching out, keep showing up. Then they warm up slightly. Maybe they finally text first. Maybe they suggest coffee. That small shift hits different because you've invested. You interpret their lukewarm response as depth. You tell yourself they were just shy or guarded or testing you. You don't see indifference. You see a puzzle you've earned the right to solve. The effort becomes the proof of their worth, not the other way around. Here's the trap. Attraction rooted in sunk cost isn't stable. It's built on the feeling of having already paid, not on who they actually are or whether they're returning the investment. You're attracted to the relief of finally getting a return on your emotional capital. Once the newness settles and you stop chasing, that gravitational pull weakens. The effort is what made them magnetic, not their character. The sticky part is recognizing it in yourself before it costs you more. When you're pulling towards someone harder than they're pulling toward you. When you're finding reasons why their distance is actually interesting. When the struggle itself feels like proof of connection. Pause there and get honest. Ask yourself, am I attracted to this person, or am I attracted to the fact that I've already sacrificed for them? There's a difference, and it matters more than you think. Real attraction doesn't need the weight of past effort to stay alive. It needs reciprocal presence, and it needs it early. The people worth keeping are the ones who make you feel chosen, not the ones you have to earn your way toward. Small confession of a flaw. You're on a first date, and the person across from you says, almost casually, I'm terrible with money. Like, embarrassingly bad. They laugh, a little vulnerable, and suddenly they feel real. That moment changes something. Vulnerability, when it's timed, right and specific, rewires attraction in ways we barely register. Most people spend their entire social lives hiding small flaws, polishing the surface, terrified that one crack will shatter the illusion. But here's what actually happens. When someone admits something genuinely human, not a humble brag disguised as confession, but a real small flaw, they become magnetic. It works because confession breaks the performance. You stop waiting for them to disappoint you, and they stop wasting energy managing your perception. The walls come down simultaneously. You're suddenly talking to a person, not a resume. This is why people fall faster for someone who laughs at their own mistake than someone who never fumbles at all. The confession doesn't have to be heavy. An awkward habit, a weird fear, a skill they lack. It just has to be true and a little uncomfortable for them to say. Timing is everything here. Too early and it feels like dumping. Too late and it feels calculated. In the sweet spot, 3 or 4 exchanges in, when there's already warmth, a small, honest flaw becomes an invitation. You're saying, I'm safe enough to be imperfect around, and the listener hears something else underneath. You don't have to be perfect either. That permission is intoxicating. The real magic isn't in the flaw itself, but in what it signals. You trust them enough to show cracks. So if you want to deepen someone's interest, stop rehearsing your highlights. Pick one small, true thing about yourself that's slightly uncomfortable to admit, then say it simply, without apology or comedy shield. Watch what happens when you let someone see the real blueprint instead of just the polished finish. Pratfall effect endearment. The The moment someone stumbles, literally or socially, most people lean in, not away. You watch a poised stranger trip on a step and suddenly they're human. The wall comes down. A confident colleague mispronounces a word in a meeting and you feel the urge to smile at them, not judge them. That shift is the pratfall effect, and it rewires how attraction works. We are magnetized to perfection at first, sure, but we fall for realness. A person who shows a crack in their armor is infinitely more magnetic than someone who never does. Here's what makes it stick. Vulnerability reads as honesty. When someone fumbles their words, laughs at their own mistake, or admits they don't know something, your brain translates that as this person is authentic. And authentic is the greenest light attraction has. The paradox is that most of us spend enormous energy hiding our mess, thinking it will repel people, when the opposite is true. Someone who can laugh at themselves, who admits when they're nervous or lost, becomes someone you want to be around. They give you permission to be imperfect too. The trick is nuance. A pratfall only endears when it rings true. A genuine stumble, a real moment of not having it together. Forced self-deprecation or manufactured vulnerability reads as manipulation and backfires hard. But a real one, a moment where you see someone's actual humanness flash across their face, that moment sticks. It's why people fall for the friend who admits they're terrified, not the one who pretends they have all the answers. It's why the person who says, "I have no idea what I'm doing," often becomes the one people trust most. The next time you're around someone you want to connect with, let your real self show. The uncertain part, the part that messes up. Don't perform flawlessness. The cracks are where the light gets in. Self-deprecation without insecurity. Watch what happens when someone at the table laughs at their own mistake, shrugs, and moves on. Zero defensiveness, zero explanation, zero fishing for reassurance. They said something awkward and caught it before anyone else did, so they named it and let it die. Notice how the room relaxes. Trust jumps. That gap between repelling self-deprecation and magnetizing self-deprecation is where the real game lives. The repelling kind is a trap. You're hoping someone will disagree with you, comfort you, prove you're not what you just said. It's validation wrapped in false humility, and people feel the desperation underneath. Suddenly, they have a job, reassure you, make you feel better, fix your self-image. The magnetic kind carries no job attached. When you say something true about your own blind spot or fumble, and you're genuinely unbothered by it, you're signaling something rare and almost unsettling. You don't need the room to fix how you see yourself. You already know who you are, so this slip doesn't shake the foundation. That absence of need is dangerous for attraction because it removes the rescue fantasy entirely. It also removes the exhaustion of being around someone constantly checking your face to confirm they're still okay. Real self-deprecation is just honesty with a light touch. You spilled coffee, you mispronounced a word, you made a dumb assumption, you notice it, you name it, and you're already thinking about the next thing. No performance lingering, no breath held for applause. That steadiness, that refusal to turn your flaws into a drama that requires an audience, is what actually draws people in. It's not the joke. It's the person who tells it and doesn't need anything back. They're already gone, already present somewhere else, already moving forward. That ease signals, I don't need you to believe in me. I already believe in myself. And that's the thing people can't look away from. Selective vulnerability timing. You notice how some people seem to always say the right honest thing at exactly the moment it lands hardest. Not a confession dumped too early when the trust isn't there yet, and not so late that the moment has passed. There's a rhythm to it. They mention a small fear during a quiet car ride. They admit a mistake right after you've been vulnerable with them. They tell you something they've never told anyone else, but only after you've already proven you won't weaponize their openness. That timing, that selectiveness, creates a specific kind of magnetic pull. It signals that they trust you, yes, but more than that, it suggests they are genuinely strategic about their own emotional safety. People who guard their vulnerability but then choose you to see it feel like a privilege to witness. Your brain registers it as such. You weren't just handed access, you were chosen for it. Here's where it gets tricky. Vulnerability performed at exactly the right moment. Vulnerable enough to feel authentic, guarded enough to feel rare, can feel more intimate than actual intimacy. Someone who shares a hand-picked story with perfect timing can feel closer than someone who tells you everything, everywhere, without filter, which is why people can feel deeply drawn to someone they barely know. The selective part is what makes it work. If someone shares with everyone equally, vulnerability becomes noise, but when it arrives in measured doses, directed specifically at you, it rewires your sense of your relationship's specialness and makes you feel like an insider in their private world. Watch for this in yourself. Are you feeling close to someone because because you actually know them, or because they've expertly timed their openness in a way that makes you feel chosen? Are they building real connection or managing your perception of them? The distinction matters more than you think, and catching it might save you from mistaking strategy for intimacy. Secret, entrusted, as a gift. Watch what happens in that moment when someone leans in and tells you something they've never told anyone else. Your entire perception of them shifts, not because they've suddenly become more interesting, but because they've made you a keeper of something sacred, a chooser. That choice rewires attraction in the background. Before either of you has words for it, you aren't just hearing information, you're being invited into their private world, and your brain immediately flags it as trust, as intimacy, as you mattering in a way that feels specific and non-negotiable. The secret itself rarely needs to be dramatic. It could be a childhood fear, a weird habit they're self-conscious about, a dream they've never spoken aloud, something embarrassing or tender, or both. What matters is the gesture underneath. They believed you wouldn't mock them, wouldn't repeat it to others, wouldn't weaponize it later. That belief is a mirror you suddenly see yourself in. You become someone safe in their eyes, someone worthy of holding fragile things, and humans are neurologically rigged to bond with people who see them clearly and hold them gently. The vulnerability becomes contagious. They opened a door, and now you want to open yours, telling them something you don't usually share, which deepens everything, which makes the attraction feel less like a conscious choice and more like gravity pulling you both closer. Secrets work because they create a small, intoxicating asymmetry, a private knowing that exists only between two people, and that boundary, that underground us against the world feeling, is magnetic. It isn't manipulation when it's genuine, but it is potent. Most people confuse being trusted with being loved, and that confusion is exactly where attraction blooms. The real trick is this: you've both just moved closer without ever needing to name it, and that unnamed shift is where the strongest bonds take root. Reciprocal self-disclosure spiral. You tell someone something real about yourself, maybe a small fear, a mistake you made, a moment you felt lonely, and watch what happens next. They don't lean back. They lean in, then they tell you something real too, something they don't usually say. And suddenly, you're not two people making small talk anymore. You're two people witnessing each other. That shift is the spiral, and it rewires attraction faster than almost anything else. The mechanism is simple, but almost invisible. When you reveal something vulnerable, you signal trust, and that signal makes the other person feel safe enough to be vulnerable back. Their vulnerability makes you feel closer, so you go deeper. You reveal more. They match it. Before either of you names it, you've built a ladder of intimacy that feels like it took months, but only took minutes. The brain reads this as intimacy because neurologically it is. Synchronized vulnerability, matched risk-taking, the sense that you're both choosing to be less defended in each other's presence. Here's the catch: this spiral feels like love when it's actually just closeness under pressure. Two people in a quiet room late at night trading confessions flood your system with bonding chemicals, and you can easily mistake the speed of the spiral for destiny. Something real is happening, and for a while, you're both right about that. But real closeness built on a spiral can sometimes collapse just as fast as it formed, because it skipped all the slower, steadier parts. The mundane trust, the boring consistency, the way you show up on a regular Tuesday when nobody's watching. The move. Notice when you're in the spiral. It's not bad, but know the difference between the feeling of intimacy and the actual depth underneath it. Real attraction has both, the spiral and the foundation. If you're only getting the spiral, you might be getting a very good impersonation of connection instead of the real thing. Rewarding disclosure with escalation. You tell someone a small secret, something you haven't told many people. Their eyes light up. They lean in. They don't judge, don't mock, don't immediately share it with the group. Instead, they match your vulnerability with their own. Go deeper, raise the stakes, that moment of being met rather than dismissed. It rewires how your brain feels about them. Vulnerability shared and then mirrored back doesn't feel risky anymore. It feels like belonging. Most people stay surface level. They keep conversations safe and shallow, which means they stay unmemorable. But when someone listens to you reveal something real and then trusts you with something equally real in return, a loop closes. You disclosed, they didn't punish you, and they escalated. That sequence tells your nervous system this person is safe enough to keep going deeper, not in a pushy way, just a natural, quiet peeling back of layers. The trap is thinking this only happens in romantic contexts. It doesn't. Your boss does this when you admit a project scared you and they admit a mistake they made. A friend does this when you share a fear and they name theirs. A teammate does this when you say something vulnerable and they meet you there instead of staying professional and distant. What's really happening is reciprocal risk. You put something on the table, they don't mock it or weaponize it, and they add their own stake to the game. The pattern repeats, and suddenly you're not just interested in each other. You're invested. You've got skin in the same game. That shared exposure, rewarded with equal exposure, becomes the glue that holds people together. If you want to deepen a connection with someone, anyone, try this. When they share something real, don't rush to advice or cheerfulness. Pause. Say something true about yourself in return. Don't make it about them. Make it about the fact that you're willing to be equally exposed. That small choice rewires everything. Cliffhanger disclosure pacing. Remember the last time someone told you a story and stopped mid-sentence? So I went to the coffee shop, and you won't believe what happened. But first, I need to tell you about my boss. Your brain doesn't just wait politely. It stops. It hungers. That hunger is cliffhanger disclosure pacing, and it might be the most magnetic thing one person can do to another without saying much of anything at all. When someone reveals information in fragments instead of all at once, your mind automatically leans in to fill the gaps. You start predicting. You start caring about the ending more than you would have if they'd dumped the whole story on you at the beginning. This is why people stay in conversations longer than they planned. This is why you find yourself asking follow-up questions you didn't expect to ask. The person isn't manipulating you. They're revealing themselves on their own timeline. And that vulnerability, mixed with the slow reveal, is intoxicating. You feel like you're learning real things about them, piece by piece, which makes you feel chosen in some way. They're letting you into the story as it unfolds, rather than handing you a finished product. In attraction, this works because it demands presence. You can't do cliffhanger pacing through a bulk text or a memo. It requires real-time connection, a pause, a look, maybe a sip of coffee while the other person wonders what comes next. It builds anticipation that feels personal because it is personal. It's not about being deliberately coy or withholding. It's about letting revelation happen at a human pace instead of a broadcast pace. The most magnetic people in any room often know how to sit with curiosity and let it breathe. They understand that mystery kept alive is far more powerful than mystery solved, and they move through conversations like they have nowhere else to be. Curiosity gap about your life. Someone you like mentions a friend's name you don't recognize or laughs at a memory from last weekend that they never told you about. That small moment of not knowing something about their world becomes a question mark in your mind, and now you're thinking about them. People are drawn to those they're curious about, not curious for, but curious about. When you hold back details deliberately, you create a gap between what someone knows and what they wonder, and they fill that gap themselves with questions, theories, mini-stories. They think about you more because part of you remains unmapped territory. Most people overshare to seem interesting. They tell the whole story, explain the context, wrap it up clean. What they don't realize is that mystery isn't absence of information. It's the right absence. You mention that Saturday was complicated, but you don't explain why. You talk about something a specific person said to you, but not the full conversation. You reference an inside joke without spelling it out. Now they're leaning in, asking questions, constructing their own narrative about you. This works because the brain despises gaps. It wants to complete the picture. And when you leave one intentionally, not cruelly or manipulatively, just naturally, people become micro-obsessed with filling it. They think about your life when you're not there. They replay conversations looking for clues. They ask mutual friends questions about you. The trap is real though. If everything is mysterious, you seem cold or unreachable. But if you're transparent about every last detail, you become a known quantity, and known quantities fade into the background noise of someone's attention. The actual sweet spot is letting your genuine life have texture. When someone asks about your weekend, don't hand them the whole documentary. Give them the trailer, make them work a little, then watch what happens. That lean forward, that slight pull toward you, that's what real attraction feels like in its quietest form. Zygarnik unfinished conversation. You're texting someone and they stop replying mid-thought. Hey, so about what happened last week? And then nothing. Radio silence. Now they're living in your head rent-free because your brain hates loose threads. That's the Zeigarnik effect at work, and it's magnetic in ways you don't consciously track. Your mind naturally completes unfinished patterns. It's wired to do it, like a puzzle you can't stop staring at until it's solved. When someone leaves a conversation hanging, doesn't finish their story, or cuts themselves off mid-revelation, you become obsessed with filling in the blanks. They feel more interesting, more mysterious, more worth thinking about. A date who says, "I probably shouldn't tell you this," and then pauses. Suddenly, you're leaning in, desperate to hear what comes next. A person who goes quiet after saying something vulnerable creates a gravitational pull that keeps you orbiting long after the conversation ends. The silence itself becomes the hook. Here's where attraction enters the picture. People who know how to leave things unresolved feel like they matter more. You don't get bored of them because there's always something left unsaid, always another layer to uncover. They become a story you're still reading, not one you finished last Tuesday and forgot. The trap is that this works both ways. Someone can keep you hanging indefinitely if they're intentional about it, creating mystery where there's actually just avoidance or gameplay. But the real magic happens when someone shares something real, stops, lets you sit with it, and trusts you enough to come back to it later. That vulnerability, plus the unfinished edge, makes them unforgettable in a way surface-level charm never does. The unresolved question becomes the reason you check your phone. Next time you notice yourself thinking about someone more than the facts justify, ask if they've mastered the art of the unfinished sentence. If they have, that's not coincidence. That's design, whether they know it or not. Ending on an unfinished note. Remember the last person who had to leave mid-conversation, right when you were both laughing, right when the energy felt real? They didn't get to say what came next, neither did you. And then your brain did something weird. It kept working on it. You replayed the moment. You imagined what they would have said. You found yourself waiting for the next time you could talk to them, maybe more intensely than if they'd stayed until the conversation naturally died. That pull toward unfinished things is not accidental. Your mind hates open loops and will literally work overtime to close them. A phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. What makes it magnetic in attraction is subtler. When a story ends neatly, your interest ends with it too. The chapter closes. But when it stops mid-sentence, when there's a question still hanging, a joke half-formed, a thread nobody pulled to its end, you become the one who has to complete it. And completion is intimate. It means your imagination is now tangled with theirs, filling a gap that only exists between the two of you. The trick is that it has to land as genuine, not calculated. A text that cuts off because you're genuinely slammed creates more magnetism than a strategic cliffhanger. People smell design. The real timing is right when things are flowing strongest, when both of you are still lit up, when stopping actually feels premature. Not cold or dismissive, just the natural edge of a moment that demands continuation. So notice next time the energy is high and climbing. Don't wait for it to peak and flatten. Step back while you're both still reaching toward each other. Leave them with something to reach for. Your absence will do more work than anything you could have said, and the space between you becomes the most interesting part of the whole story. Ambiguity of intent. You send a text and get back okay with no emoji. Your stomach tightens. Were they mad, bored, fine? Your brain hates that gap, that space between what they said and what they meant, so it fills it, usually with the worst story available. And here's what most people miss, that uncertainty is actually magnetic. When someone is just slightly unclear about how much they like you, you think about them differently. You work harder to decode them. You stay. A clear, steady, "I enjoy talking to you" feels nice for a moment. Then it settles. But ambiguity, it's a hook. It keeps you reaching, guessing, hoping the next conversation will finally clarify things. This is why the person who occasionally leaves you hanging can feel more interesting than the person who's always warm and direct. You literally can't relax around it. Your nervous system won't let you. That tension masquerades as chemistry. Someone who is deliberately vague about their feelings, their plans, or whether they're joking or serious keeps you in a state of slight activation. You're trying to solve them and trying to solve another person, trying to figure out if they're into you or just being nice is exhausting, but it's also strangely intoxicating. The ambiguity of intent works because it hijacks your attention completely, a clear rejection you can process and move on from. But a maybe, a perhaps, a we'll see, that lives in your head, rent-free for weeks, playing out scenarios. The tricky part is recognizing when someone's ambiguity is just avoidance dressed up as intrigue. And when you've actually mistaken uncertainty for depth. Watch for people who are ambiguous about everything versus those rare few who are mysteriously quiet about one specific thing. That selective mystery usually has more substance. The people worth your time tend to be clear about caring, even if they're reserved about other things. Uncertainty of interest attraction. Remember the last time someone you liked went quiet for a few hours and suddenly your phone felt like a puzzle you couldn't solve? That gap between messages, that tiny not knowing, it rewired your attention in real time. You checked your phone more, you replayed the conversation, you became almost involuntarily curious about what was happening in their head. This is uncertainty of interest attraction, and it's wired into your nervous system like a smoke alarm. Your brain treats ambiguity about someone's feelings the same way it treats any unresolved tension. It won't let go until the gap closes. If someone seems consistently interested, you relax a little and feel secure. But if they're warm one day and distant the next, if they reply quickly sometimes and leave you hanging other times, if you genuinely cannot predict where you stand, your dopamine system goes into search mode. That uncertainty becomes magnetic because your brain is literally trying to solve a puzzle, and unsolved puzzles hijack attention better than certainty ever can. The person who is hard to read often feels more captivating than the person who's easy. We confuse the effort of decoding them with the depth of the connection, and if you're the one doing the uncertain signaling, even unintentionally, you're accidentally amplifying someone's attraction without trying. A delayed text, a mixed message, a moment where they can't quite tell if you're into them. These create a small mystery that pulls harder than clarity does. The move here isn't to play games with uncertainty or treat it as a weapon. It's to notice when you're being pulled by the question mark rather than by the actual person standing in front of you, because attraction built on not knowing is fragile. The moment the uncertainty resolves, the magic often evaporates and you're left wondering what you were actually drawn to. Storytelling with sensory immersion. Close your eyes and someone tells you about rain, not "it rained," but the smell of wet pavement before the first drop, the sound of it drumming on a tin roof, the cold shock of it on your neck, the taste of it in the air. Suddenly, you are not listening to words. You are standing in that moment. That shift from your living room into their story is what makes someone magnetic. When people feel like they're experiencing something rather than being told about it, attraction happens almost without them noticing. Think of the friend who tells you about their terrible date and you're wincing along with them, tasting the burnt coffee, hearing the awkward silence. You're not just sympathizing, you're there. Meanwhile, someone else recounts the exact same date with no texture, just facts stacked like bricks, and you nod politely while mentally planning dinner. The sensory version rewires how people feel about you. Researchers have found that when your brain engages multiple senses while listening, it doesn't just remember better, it bonds harder to the person creating that experience. Your brain is essentially saying, "This person knows how to make me feel alive." That is attractive on a cellular level. The trap most people fall into is thinking they need dramatic stories. You don't. A stranger describing how their grandmother's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and burnt sugar, or how their hands feel in cold water, creates more pull than someone boasting about their accomplishments in plain language. Sensory detail is the difference between someone you tolerate and someone you want to hear from again. The next time you tell a story, whether it's about your day, a memory, something you want someone to care about, slow down and add one sensory element. Not overdone, not purple prose, just one genuine detail that puts the listener inside the moment instead of outside looking in. That small anchor is often enough to make you unforgettable. Emotional transportation via narrative. Someone tells you a story about getting lost in a foreign city, and suddenly you feel the humid air, taste the street food, see the crooked cafe sign. Your body isn't there, but your nervous system is. That's emotional transportation, and it runs deeper than almost any other form of connection. When someone can pull you inside their world so completely that you forget you're listening, you don't just like them, you feel bonded to them in a way logic can't touch. We bond through shared experience, and narrative is the closest you can get to living someone else's life without actually being there. The person who can transport you, who makes you feel what they felt, see what they saw, becomes magnetic because they've given you access to their inner world. It's not about the story being objectively true or perfectly polished. It's about that sensation of being taken somewhere real, somewhere that mattered to them. Think about who you're most drawn to. Often it's someone who tells stories where you can actually feel the anxiety, the relief, the small victory nobody else would notice. Your brain literally mirrors theirs when you're inside a good narrative, and that mirroring is the invisible handshake between two nervous systems. The trap is that people who've learned to tell stories that land become harder to resist because you're not just hearing information, you're living a moment with them. And living moments together, even in story form, is how intimacy actually starts. The best storytellers in any room become the center because they've weaponized attention itself. They're not just speaking, they're borrowing your consciousness. When you feel that pull towards someone who holds a room with a single story, you're not reacting to words, you're reacting to being invited into their life. Next time someone transports you, pause and notice it. That's them pulling you closer without touching you, making your attention, the most valuable currency you have, completely theirs. Role play of a shared scenario. Imagine this. One of you leans back and says, "Okay, so we're stranded on an island. What do you do?" And suddenly, you're not just two people on a couch anymore. You're building something together, and your brain recognizes that immediately. When two minds start constructing the same fictional moment, something shifts. You stop being separate and become co-creators, and that's the trap. Your nervous system loves being understood so deeply that someone else can predict what you'd want, what you'd fear, what you'd value when the stakes are fake, but the logic feels entirely real. The role play doesn't need to be elaborate or flirty or explicitly romantic. It could be mundane, absurd, even silly. We're opening a cafe together. You pick the music, I'll design the space. In that small imaginary, you're both revealing your taste, your humor, your priorities without defenses up, and you're doing it collaboratively instead of in the usual vulnerable, one-directional way where you expose yourself and wait to see if you'll be rejected. But here's where the chemistry actually happens. Roleplay splits the risk. You're both pretending, so if something lands wrong, there's plausible deniability. Yet you're also both leaning into the same story, which means you're synchronized. And synchrony is where attraction lives. Your nervous systems start to mirror each other's rhythm and cadence. The scenario becomes a private language, something only you two understand and can reference later. When something reminds one of you of that island or that cafe months down the line, it's a small jolt of connection that nobody else can decode. The real pull isn't in the scenario itself. It's in the fact that you both chose to inhabit the same imaginary space together, which means you chose each other as the person worth creating with. That's the stickiness. Roleplay proves compatibility in real time, wrapped in permission to play. It's low stakes on the surface and impossibly intimate underneath. Future projection language. Two small sentences sit on opposite sides of a line. "I can't wait to show you," versus "I will show you." The first one isn't just a promise, it's a time machine. It pulls you into a shared future that doesn't exist yet, and your brain starts living there before your feet ever move. When someone uses language that assumes you'll both be somewhere together, when they talk about things as if you're already woven into the next chapter, something neurological flips. You're not just hearing words, you're mentally rehearsing a scenario where the two of you exist as a unit. Your brain doesn't draw a hard line between imagined futures and real ones, so when someone says, "I think you'd love this restaurant, we should go sometime," they've already placed you there. You can taste it. You can see the two of you across a table. The neural machinery fires up before you even realize it's happening. Flip it the other way. Someone who says, "I might try that place, you should check it out too," leaves you outside the frame entirely. They're not projecting you forward. They're suggesting parallel tracks, two separate lives that happen to run near each other. People who weave you naturally into their tomorrows, who use language that assumes continuity, feel like they've already chosen you. They're speaking as if the relationship has momentum, as if you belong in it. That's where the attraction lives, in that subtle assumption that you're part of what comes next. Here's what makes it stick. Language shapes behavior backward. When someone talks like you're in their future, they start behaving like you belong there. The words arrive first, then the belief, then the genuine care follows behind it. If you want to magnetize someone, stop pitching isolated moments and start projecting timelines where they're already in the frame. Presupposition of togetherness. Someone says, "When we go to that restaurant next month," not "if we go." They don't ask permission for the future. They assume you're already in it. That tiny word shift, from conditional to assumed, rewires something in your chest that most people never learn to spot. You feel chosen before you've even decided. The presupposition does the work your doubt couldn't undo. It collapses the space between stranger and partner. If I'm already planning around you, speaking as though your presence is non-negotiable, then on some level, your brain stops treating the connection as fragile or temporary. It's treated as solved, done, ownership without ownership. They've written you into the plot before you knew the book was open. Watch how it lands differently. Maybe we could hang out sometime versus we should check out that show together. One is a question. The other is a fait accompli wearing casual clothes. The second one doesn't give your nervous system room to collapse into self-protection. It says you're already safe, already included, already theirs. Here's what makes it stick. Presupposition feels intimate because it feels inevitable. It bypasses the usual negotiation where two separate people have to decide if they want the same thing. Instead, it assumes the decision is already behind you both. And your brain, lazy and pattern-seeking, often agrees just to avoid the friction of correcting them. Why fight something that feels like it's already happening? People who do this well aren't being manipulative in the obvious sense. They're just moving as if you're already on the journey. And because human connection craves narrative momentum, because we want to feel chosen and inevitable, you find yourself speeding up to match their assumption. Your nervous system relaxes into the story they've already started writing. Before you know it, you're the one defending the togetherness they casually presupposed all along. Assumptive we framing. Someone says, we should grab dinner sometime, and you feel a small lift, not because the plan is solid, it's probably not, but because they said we. That word is a tiny architecture of belonging. It doesn't ask permission to include you. It assumes you're already in. The brain picks this up instantly, and it feels good. Assumptive we framing works because it does something subtle to your status in that moment. It places you on the same side of an invisible line. You are not an outsider being invited in. You are already part of the team, already the kind of person this matters to. We'd probably annoy the waiter is different from you might annoy the waiter. One of those makes you complicit. One makes you alone. The magic is in the skip. Real inclusion requires the other person to first ask, then wait, then welcome. Assumptive framing skips straight to you're in, which feels faster and warmer because it doesn't give your anxiety time to organize its doubts. By the time your brain catches up, you're already committed. You're already we. People use this without thinking. We'd hate that movie, or we're the kind of people who order the weird thing. It's not manipulation when it's genuine, but notice how often you feel drawn to someone who simply decides you belong in their story without waiting for formal permission. They don't audition you, they already cast you, and because they did, you start to believe your own part in it. The catch is that this only works if the person is sincere. Fake we framing sounds rehearsed and lands wrong, but when someone genuinely sees you as part of their world before you've even proven yourself, when they're not gatekeeping but opening, that assumption becomes a quiet form of recognition. And recognition is what attraction runs on. The warmth you feel isn't just about being included, it's about being chosen before you had to earn it. Anticipation, seeding for next time. You know that feeling when someone leaves a conversation mid-thought, not rudely but deliberately. I could tell you the rest over dinner, or there's a reason I'm smiling, but you'll have to wait. They're not withholding information to be cruel. They're doing something far more magnetic. They're making your brain want them back. The gap between now and next time becomes the most interesting thing in your mind. Neuroscience calls this the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished stories lodge in memory harder than neat ones. But attraction amplifies it. When someone seeds anticipation, they're essentially planting a reason for you to think about them tomorrow, next week, whenever the promise was. A half confession, a story that stops at the most crucial moment, a suggestion of depth you haven't accessed yet. The asymmetry is key. They know something you don't, and you suddenly care what it is. This isn't manipulation if it's genuine, if there actually is more, if the reveal will hit differently in person, but it works precisely because it makes the other person feel incomplete without you. You start checking your phone. You daydream about what they meant. You find excuses to circle back. People who are magnetic rarely answer every question on the first pass. They leave threads. They say, "You have no idea," with a small smile, and move on. They mention something fascinating and change the subject before explaining it. They'll drop a tiny detail about their past and refuse to elaborate until the next time you're alone. The effect compounds. Each unresolved moment makes you lean in harder next time. Your brain literally rewires itself to prioritize them, treating them as a puzzle worth solving. So if you want to be memorable, don't give everything away on the spot. Make people curious about what's left. Stay mysterious, not out of fear, but out of respect for the reveal. The ones worth attracting aren't looking for encyclopedias. They're looking for reasons to come back. Peak end memory engineering. Imagine a date that starts rough. You're late. The reservation falls through. There's tension in the car, but then, halfway through, something shifts. A conversation lands. A laugh breaks the ice. The waiter brings something unexpected. By the end, you're both leaning in. The night feels almost perfect, and when they text you the next morning, you're already thinking about the next one. You didn't actually have a good date. You had a forgettable start and a memorable peak, and your brain literally discarded the middle. That's peak end memory. It's not what happened overall, it's the emotional high point plus how it ended, and that math becomes your entire memory of the experience. People don't judge time passing with you on an average. They judge you on the sharpest moment and the last moment. A 3-hour dinner where the first 90 minutes are fine, the next 90 are magic, and the last 30 are awkward. You're remembered as someone who got awkward at the end, not the person who was funny and present. Flip it. Same 3 hours, but the last 30 minutes are when you finally relax, when you both are laughing, when something unguarded happens. The memory becomes, this person is wonderful. Your brain doesn't store a highlight reel of everything that happened. It stores a snapshot. One peak moment that stood out plus the final frame, and it stitches those two together and calls that the truth. So the invisible trigger is learning to engineer a visible lift, not fake enthusiasm or forced moments, real ones. But notice where the energy is sagging and nudge it. Ask a question that matters. Suggest something that breaks the routine. End the night earlier than it feels natural to end it, while the moment still has temperature. People romanticize the version they remember, not the version that happened, and memory is built on peaks and closes. You're not trying to make every second count, you're trying to make the countable seconds sharp. Leaving before the peak. There's a dinner party where you've been laughing for 3 hours straight, wine flowing, conversation electric. Everyone feels alive. You check the time, feel the first real tiredness creeping in, and slip out quietly. 2 days later, your friend texts. They're still thinking about you, not because you stayed longest, but because you left while things were still good. Your absence became more interesting than your presence would have been if you'd overstayed. Most people assume attraction lives in duration. More time equals more connection. The actual mechanic is stranger. Attraction lives in momentum, in the gap you create when you exit before the energy crests. You leave mid-story. Their brain keeps writing the narrative without you. They fill in blanks, imagine what you were thinking, wonder what you might have said next, whether you had somewhere better to be. That incompleteness is magnetic. It's why movies ending ambiguously stick longer than tidy endings, why the best text exchanges are ones where someone doesn't reply until the next day. Your mind circles back to the question. People who stay until the party dies, who answer every message instantly, who show up for everything, become legible, predictable, no mystery left. Someone who brings full energy then vanishes, who creates a little space, who leaves people wanting 5 more minutes. They become a question mark in someone else's mind. And we're drawn to questions we can't quite answer. The trap is thinking you need more presence to be more attractive. The real leverage is smaller and weirder. Show up fully, then go. Let them miss you. Let there be a day where they replay something you said, wondering what you might have done next. That gap, that pause, that space where you were but now aren't. That's where desire actually builds. It's not rejection, it's restraint. And restraint is what separates the forgettable from the unforgettable. Costly signaling of time. You notice someone who's constantly rushing, checking their phone, cutting conversations short, always on to the next thing. Now picture someone else sitting with you for 20 minutes, never glancing at their screen once. The second person feels more attractive, and you probably didn't even realize why. It has almost nothing to do with what they said, and everything to do with what they sacrificed to say it. Time is the only resource you can't get back. So when someone gives it to you freely, real, uninterrupted presence, your brain registers that as a signal of genuine value. They chose you over their inbox, over their urgency, over the version of themselves that's always half somewhere else. That's costly. That's rare. That's magnetic. The flip side cuts just as deep. Someone who's always too busy, always squeezing you in, always leaving early. They're broadcasting that you're low priority, and no amount of nice words rewrites that signal. Attraction lives in feeling chosen, and chosen people feel the weight of that choice. The people who draw others in are often the ones who sit still long enough to let you matter. No grand gestures required. A person who cancels their own plans to listen, who puts the phone away without being asked, who doesn't check the time. They're signaling something primal. You're worth more than what I could be doing instead. Your nervous system hears that before your conscious mind catches up, and it responds with magnetism. The real tension is this. Attention has become the new scarcity. Everyone's fractured, everyone's half present, so the person who can actually be there, fully, consistently, without the fidget, registers as almost dangerous in how appealing they become. Watch next time someone sticks with you. It's never the person who gave the most compliments. It's always the person who gave their actual presence. If you want to be magnetic to someone, the shortcut isn't better looks or smoother words. It's simply deciding that right now, this person, this conversation, is where you genuinely want to be. False sense of a shared past. You meet someone, and within 5 minutes, they reference a movie you love, or a city you're obsessed with, or a band that shaped your adolescence. And something shifts beneath the surface. Not because they're similar to you on paper, but because your brain suddenly feels less alone in the universe. This is the false past trick, and it works because our minds are lazy pattern matchers, desperate to find evidence that we've already known someone. When a stranger mentions they grew up poor like you, or their mom was a nurse, or they also spent that one summer feeling completely lost, your brain doesn't think, interesting coincidence. It thinks, we have history. You feel seen, but you're really just recognizing yourself reflected back. The alchemy is brutal. Shared references become shared experiences, and shared experiences become proof of compatibility. Someone who laughs at the same podcast as you starts to feel like home, even though they've never met your family, never fought with you in a car, never held you on your worst day. The attraction builds because it feels efficient, like you've skipped the scary part of getting to know each other and landed somewhere safer. But here's what makes it dangerous. This false sense of a shared past actually delays real bonding. You think you know them because your brain found a few matching puzzle pieces. So you relax your guard earlier than you normally would, assume understanding that hasn't been earned, and project your own meaning onto empty spaces. They mention they love traveling, and you assume they're restless like you. They quote a philosopher, and you assume they think deeply. None of this is tested or lived through together. Real intimacy doesn't happen when you feel like you've already known someone. It happens when you stay curious about the actual person standing in front of you, the stranger whose story hasn't yet been written by your need to recognize yourself in them. Vocal fry intimacy register. Next time you're on a call with someone you're drawn to, notice if their voice drops into a lower register, that creaky, almost whisper quality that feels like they're speaking just for you. Vocal fry isn't a flaw. It's a signal. When people shift into that rougher, lower range, they're often unconsciously narrowing their audience to one person. It's the vocal equivalent of leaning in. Your brain catches that micro shift instantly, even if you can't name it, and interprets it as intimacy or vulnerability. The person isn't performing for a room anymore. They're talking to you. That changes everything about how you perceive them. What makes this so sticky is that it triggers something primal. Exclusivity. We are drawn to people who seem to reserve a special register, a private frequency, just for us. It doesn't have to be dramatic. A slight drop in pitch, a softening of tone, a creaky quality that wasn't there a moment ago. These signal that you matter enough for them to shift gears. Compare it to someone who speaks in the same bright, broadcast voice to everyone. They feel nice, sure, but not intimate. Not chosen. Here's the trap. Vocal fry has been unfairly mocked, especially in women, as something shallow or annoying. But neuroscience and attraction research show it works because it mimics the voice of someone speaking softly to a lover or a very close friend. Lower, closer to a growl, slightly breathy. It's the opposite of a performance voice. When someone drops into that register around you, you're not hearing their public self. You're hearing their close self. The next time someone's voice shifts lower or rougher when they talk to you, pause for a second. Don't assume it's random. They may not even be aware they're doing it, but your nervous system absolutely is, and it's reading that vocal shift as a form of selective intimacy. That's why it sticks. Waist to hip ratio glance. Somewhere in the first millisecond of noticing someone, your eyes drop from face to frame and measure something you'll never put into words. That shape, The ratio of waist to hip registers like a barcode before your conscious mind even catches up. Not judgment, not decision, just raw data traveling through a nervous system that evolved long before words existed. Women with a waist-to-hip ratio around 0.7, waist roughly 70% the width of hips, trigger something deep in the male attention system, and researchers find this preference echoes across cultures and centuries, a signal for fertility, health, hormonal balance, the whole genetic fitness package. On the flip side, men with a V-shaped torso, shoulders broad, hips narrow, light up the female attraction circuitry the same way, signaling strength and testosterone and genes that whisper survival and protection. Here's the thing nobody wants to admit. That glance is completely automatic, but everything that follows belongs entirely to you. You can feel pulled toward someone for 100 reasons that have nothing to do with waist-to-hip geometry, their laugh, the way they think, how they move through a room, a voice that catches you off guard, how they listen when you speak. Yet that first microscan happens anyway. A little evolutionary burst your body runs in the background while you're still forming words. The real danger isn't noticing the attraction. Your body isn't lying to you. The danger is letting that split-second calculation become the whole story, the final word on whether someone matters. Your nervous system speaks an ancient language, and you're not broken for hearing it. What actually matters is the space right after that glance, the moment where you choose whether to stay curious about the actual person standing in front of you, or whether to stop looking altogether. That gap between the trigger and your next conscious move is where you have all the power. Pheromonal ovulation sensitivity. There's a smell you don't consciously register, but your body does, and it changes who you want to be near. During ovulation, a woman's body releases chemical signals through sweat, breath, and skin that shift her scent in measurable ways. Men don't smell it like perfume. Their brains detect it through the vomeronasal organ, a sensory pathway that bypasses conscious awareness entirely. Studies show men rate women as more attractive, more symmetrical, and sexier during peak fertility windows. Not because the woman looks different, but because her chemistry whispered something his nervous system heard before his mind did. The twist is that this attraction is strongest in men with certain immune markers, suggesting your body is literally shopping for genetic diversity without your permission. Women in committed relationships often suppress this signal, both chemically and behaviorally. Their pheromone profile actually dampens during ovulation if their partner is already bonded to them. Single women spike it higher, almost like their chemistry is running its own dating app in the background. What makes this particularly sneaky is that both people feel like they're choosing freely. He feels magnetized by her energy. She feels irresistible. Neither knows their brains were dueling with invisible molecules before the conversation even started. And here's the real kicker. If you're on hormonal birth control, you're essentially silent on this chemical channel. You lose the signal boost, which some research suggests might shift who you're attracted to. Meaning the pill doesn't just prevent pregnancy, it potentially rewires your mating radar. That's not a judgment. It's just your biology running a campaign you never signed up for. Your cells are having conversations your conscious mind will never overhear. The next time you feel that unexplainable pull toward someone, remember, attraction isn't always about what you see or hear. Sometimes it's what your nervous system decided before you even walked into the room, and that decision was made in a language you were never taught to speak. Eye contact held one beat too long. You're in a conversation, maybe at a bar, maybe at work, and someone looks at you while they're listening. Normal so far, but then they don't look away. Not in a creepy stairway, just present, a half second longer than the social script allows. Your nervous system notices before your conscious mind does. Something shifts. That tiny overhold of eye contact is not an accident. It's a signal that says, I see you, and I'm not checking out of this moment. Most people think attraction lives in big gestures, compliments, touches, grand declarations, but the real wiring happens in these millisecond gaps. Eye contact that lingers exactly long enough to feel deliberate, but not so long it becomes uncomfortable, is a form of presence. It tells your brain, this person is choosing me right now. There's no pretense in it, no scanning the room for a better option, no autopilot, and that intentionality is magnetic. Your brain reads it as confidence, as interest, as safety, all at once. The tricky part is that most people have no idea they're doing it, and most people who feel it can't quite name what just happened. You might find yourself thinking about that person later, replaying the conversation, trying to figure out why it felt different. It probably wasn't what they said. It was the quality of attention they held while they were with you. That one held beat of eye contact is also a test, a quiet way of checking if you're real, if you're willing to meet them there. And if you match it, even for a moment, you've just told them something your words haven't said yet. It's the smallest commitment, and somehow the largest. The signal spreads through your whole body in ways you won't feel consciously until hours later. Next time you catch yourself holding someone's gaze a fraction longer than necessary, pause. You might be showing them exactly what they needed to see. Pupil dilation feedback loop. You're sitting across from someone at a bar and you notice their eyes look alive, wider, darker, almost magnetic. What you're actually seeing is their pupils reacting to you. Pupils dilate when we're interested or aroused, which is a dead honest signal your conscious mind can't fake. But here's where it gets circular. When you catch that dilation, something shifts in you. You feel seen, you feel wanted, and that feeling makes your own pupils dilate in response, which the other person picks up on, which deepens their sense that you're into them. Neither of you is lying. You're both just watching each other become more attracted in real time. This loop runs silent and fast. Most people never consciously notice pupil size. They just feel the vibe get heavier, warmer, more charged. The pupils are doing the work while you're busy thinking of something clever to say. And because it's unconscious, it carries more weight than words. A compliment can feel forced. Wider pupils feel like truth. What makes this trigger so impossibly sticky is that it's bidirectional. Attraction isn't something one person does to another. It's a feedback system. The moment one person's nervous system signals interest, it activates interest in the other person, which signals back, which amplifies the first. You can watch it happen in slow motion if you pay attention. A slight widening, a micro pause, a shift in how someone's face settles when they look at you. The trap is thinking you can manipulate this. You can't dilate your pupils on command, and fake dilation gets caught somewhere in the limbic system. People feel the artificial before they see it. What you can do is actually pay attention. When someone's pupils widen, they've already decided you're interesting before you ever opened your mouth. That moment is an invitation. The real work isn't performing attraction. It's noticing you've already begun attracting them and whether you're present enough to meet what's actually happening in front of you. Breaking eye contact downward. Watch someone you're attracted to break eye contact by looking down instead of away to the side or up. It lands different. There's a vulnerability in it, a softness that sideways glances don't carry. When you look down, you're not scanning for escape or dismissing someone. You're doing something quieter. You're feeling something and you need a moment. Your nervous system is showing, and somehow that's magnetic. People mistake it for shyness, but it's actually the opposite of a power move. It's an admission. It's a pause that says the conversation matters enough that you need to collect yourself. The brain reads this as genuine, not performed. In a world where everyone's learned to hold their gaze steady, to appear confident and unaffected, looking down in the middle of connection feels rare. It reads as honesty. When someone does this while you're talking about something you care about, their eyes dropping to your chest or their lap instead of locking onto yours, something in you softens too. You interpret it as, they're not trying to dominate the moment, they're experiencing it with you. There's no arena energy. It feels like intimacy instead of a contest. The tricky part is timing. A downward break too early feels evasive, too late, and it reads as indifference, but caught at exactly the right second. When the thing you just said landed, when the air between you shifted, that downward glance becomes proof that you reached them. It's the visual equivalent of a breath intake, the kind that says they're not performing through the feeling, but living inside it with you. They felt you, and the fact that their reflex was to look inward, to process, to be present with the sensation rather than push through it or deflect, that's what makes the whole thing stick so hard. Most people never clock why they're drawn in. They just know looking down at the right moment changes everything about how close you feel. Slow blink comfort signal. Watch someone you trust for a few seconds. Really watch. Notice when they close their eyes just a fraction longer than a normal blink, like they're luxuriating in a moment of peace. That